When I walk into the Mesifta, I come some ale, and I see Shabbos morning, hundreds of Bochurim sitzen and learn Chassidus. It's Pashat Hanor to see how the Rebbe is working today. Bochurim learn Chassidus, gehen auf Mivtzoim. The Kochen Rebbe's in Yonim is unbelievable. By the way, it's unparalleled in Jewish history, because we know what people said about the day after Gimmel TammuzAnd. And everyone is loaded that it's Pashat Fakert.
I'm Yossi Kamen. Welcome to Among Chassidim by Der Herr, an ongoing farbrengen about life as a chassid, our vibrant connection with the Rebbe, and inspired living shaped by the way he teaches us each and every day. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Wolf, how are you?
Aleichem Shalom.
Okay. So I actually saw that you wrote some articles recently. I think you're commemorating 50 years of Shlichus.
Correct.
So, I mean, I read one. I think there was multiple. I read one of them. So I didn't realize you were a Shliach in Australia. It's 50 years commemorating that Shlichus, or in Chicago?
No, the Shlichus in general, which began with the Shlichus in Melbourne.
So that was Tafshin Lamed
Tafshin Lamed Hey. Chaf Gimel Ir Tafshin Lamed Hey. We walked into Yechidus'n, and that's where it all started. I have to say, it started Daled Nissen earlier, when we were called in by the Maskiris. I was called in by Binyamin Klein, but our group was called in different times of the day, I guess, and asked 3 questions. Are you willing to go to Melbourne? B'tzeincha atov, Shlichus. Would your parents give you permission? We need their permission. And if you are b'kav habrius, these were the 3 questions. Within, I think, 90 seconds or 180 seconds, as long as it took to contact my parents, and by the payphone on Kingston Avenue, the Amoliga payphone that we used to use for a dime. So it was all straightened out within several minutes.
And so your parents, what you asked permission, or you told your father, I need permission?
No, I told my father that I need permission. He said right away, yes. You have to understand where my father came from. If not for my father in Samarkand, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I should go into that.
Your father was a Lubavitcher?
My father, obviously, he wasn't born and bred as a Lubavitcher Chassid, but later on, he was one of the refugees that ended up in Samarkand. Polish refugees, a Galicianerid. So he ended up in Samarkand, like so many Polish refugees did. And if I can share with you an incredible story, how he met Chabad.
I would love to hear it.
The refugees at the time coming from Poland to Russia, they didn't know the language. They didn't know Russian, and they didn't know how to work the system. So people were literally dying from hunger. He lost his father, his mother, and he ended up being sent to Siberia in January of 1940. In 1941, he is off somehow Uzbekistan, Samarkand, first Tashkent, then Samarkand. People were dying from hunger every day. He told me that he was so famished, they gehungert, that at nighttime he became blind from malnutrition. Can you imagine?
Wow.
He told me he once walked into an Uzbek, a local guy, into his house, and he didn't know where it was going. It was nighttime. He was blind. But then, so the guy picks up a butcher knife, and he starts chasing him. He said, Ada Yom, he doesn't know how he was saved. But anyway.
One second. So, can I go back a second? So he's a Galicianerid living in Poland. So World War II breaks out. Where is he from?
He's from Krakow.
From Krakow.
A suburb of Krakow.
So he escapes the Nazis over the border into USSR.
Correct. And he was, he was up to Lemberg, and somehow in Lvov area, there was some type of a border with Russia, and he made a critical decision, and that was in late December of 1939, or maybe the first week of January, and he made a decision which he had to make, either to stay behind in the German side.
1 second. The war broke out in the summer 1939.
September 1939. So the first several months,
so this
you're busy.
December. Okay.
You're busy running.
Right. Okay.
So he's running, and he ended up, a long story short, he ended up in Russia, and they sent him immediately to Siberia. So he was 1 year in Siberia. He used to say how they were cutting down trees, and even Pesach saying, Avodah me'inu lepare b'Mitzrayim, while they're cutting down trees. Actually, my mother went the same journey. They didn't know of each other. They were both refugees and following actually the same journey played out with my mother. But anyway, they ended up, my father ends up in Samarkand, as I told you. He's famished. He's one Motzei Shabbos, he's walking the streets. No father, no mother, the Milchama, people dying. The Chevra Kadisha came every day driving through the roads mit der Feld and Wagen, and they picked up the mason. So he is mamish famished. He's walking Motzei Shabbos. He's hallucinating, and suddenly he hears singing. Singing. He thought he was hallucinating. But as he's walking, not walking, geschleppt, the singing is becoming louder. He walks into what he told me, dire, and it was Motzei Shabbos. There was a Malava Malka from the Chassidim going on. He even told me who was there. Reb David Horodoker, Reb Peretz Mochkin, Reb Yudel Chitrik, Shmerel Batuma. That whole Chavraya was there. And they saw a Polish Bacha walking in, hungrig wie die Welt. And there was the only food that was on the table, he told me, was katoshke mit a bissel mashke. And they took him under his wings, and the rest is history. So later on, after the war in 1945, he ended up at the DP camps in Poking. In Poking, over there too, he met Reb Yudel Chitrik. All the other Chassidim that ended up in Montreal, he met in Poking. And he was 5-6 years in Belgium. In Belgium, Antwerp, he was a diamond cutter, finally came. He was hoping to go to New York because they had a diamond district. But Beper Mamashi ended up in Montreal. The Hayas ended up in Montreal. The reason why he left Belgium was because of the Korean War, and there was talk that it's going to reach to Europe. Reaching Europe, he had enough of war and dying and famine and whatnot, and these people were traumatized. So was my father and mother. My father and mother met in Samarkand. They were describing their wedding. It was Friday afternoon. Sie gewann a paar Minyanim Yidden, and that's where they got married.
They got married in Samarkand.
Yeah, they got married. They met in Samarkand.
So your father came into Lubavitch al derech Avram Avinu. You know, they gave because he's whatever he ate.
It wasn't exactly ben Gimmel TammuzAnd Bochurim. It was a bit older, but
I'm saying the Chassidim like Avram Avinu. They gave him something to eat.
Yeah, that's right. They gave him something to eat. Now, upon him, he ended up in Montreal, and there he got back to Reb Peretz Mochkin and to Yudel Chitrik.
So he knew
the Yidden, and he sent us. I was 5 years old. He sent me to Cheder Lubavitch.
You were born in
Montreal.
In Montreal.
Yeah. So he sent me Cheder. It was called the Lubavitch Yeshiva. It was a Cheder, a small room on Jean Mann Street. Whoever is a Montrealer that will be hearing this. And who was my first Melamed? An incredible Chassidish Yid. Reb David Leib Morozov. If you heard of Reb David Leib, he was the oldest son of Chonya Morozov. I can picture the room that I was sitting. I wasn't even 5 years old yet. I came in Elul. I was a month before my 5th birthday. So I'm a little kid. There wasn't a toy in the room.
Right.
Wooden desks, Zitzach HaMelamed, and he had such a regal appearance. He always wore his double-breasted. It was like more of a lange rekel that the Polish used to wear. Well, maybe today too. And he was sitting with his hat and jacket. He had a pencil and a wooden ruler, and he was such a reiche tzir. I can never forget it. I don't remember what I learned then. I remember one thing, that he taught us the Asara, the 10 Gunim of the Alter Rebbe.
There's recordings of him singing.
Singing.
Yeah.
Now, it's very interesting because he suffered from asthma. So, it's like sapping. He couldn't catch his breath at times. But we were little kids, and we learned in the Gunim from Alter Rebbe, and he taught it to us. And the way he said, the way he taught us how to read, heißt das Ivre, Pashat Atzia von American Chassid. But he passed away in the Chavs. I think it was Chavav that he passed away. But I can truly say that was a Chassidish Chinuch. You know, when you learn about, Yem, a pin telefon neben, a pin telefon unten, that's the Tzia. Mm. But anyway, I had tremendous mechanchim malamdim in Montreal.
Was
but the Arum from Chassidus.
The Bildel Chitek was there too, right?
Yeah, I had him 2 years, different times. I had him 2 years. He taught me my bar mitzvah mimer, and he taught me how to learn, and he was a Chassidish Yid. In fact, sagte erzählen wegen Greinem. Greinem was his mashpia. So we heard a lot about Greinem. I can't tell you that I remember everything that he said. But Al Kaponim, there were tziyurim over there. I remember going into Reperet's Farbrengens. I remember one Purim, which is so much, I remember it very clearly. It was before the time, versteht sich. I was a kid, I was 10, 11. It was before Tafshin Lamed, when the hookups began. Reperetz was sitting in his basement where he lived. He lived next to the Lubavitch Yeshiva in Montreal. And mamish today, it's the yeshiva Gedela is there now, so it's a different building. But it used to be a house, and he lived in the basement. It was Purim at night. I went with my father. Peretz was like his Rebbe, He taught him Chassidus, and he got him involved. Every Shabbos, he used to end up being there 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, learning Chassidus. Nachman Shapiro, even lately, reminded me about that tzir. He was a kid staying over by Yezeda, and how they used to sit and learn from the early hours of the morning. But anyway, it was Purim Banacht, and he was sitting. He took a lot of mashke Peretz, had stark verbracht. Berel Moshkin, his son, was behind him, gesungen Chassidish Nagunim. I remember it well because they were singing some of the Nagunim that I heard, versteht sich, from David Leib Morozov and other Nagunim they were singing, but it made a tremendous impression. One of the things that was missing at the time was, as a 10, 11-year-old, there was no Verbrengens with the Kittas. I don't know why, there wasn't. So this fear of a Verbrengen really, really registered, it resonated. Achsidish Yid system, Verbrengt mit Nelam, etc., etc.
So there's a painting of Zalman Kleiman of Ältere Chassid was Verbrengt, and there's some kids in the background. So this is that painting is what you experienced probably.
100%, 100%. I mean, I remember even at the time, like every second year, Rebbe Nissen used to come and Verbrengt. I remember one thing that he used to say over and over again, and I was a kid, 12, 13, kids. A Yid is a Kabbalosonnik, and a Kabbalosonnik is a Yid. And the way he said it, with the ganze Ernstkeit, made an impression. There were times Reb Sadia used to come, Reb Sadia used to Verbrengt.
Sadia Librov.
Yeah, and one of the Iker things that came out from Reb Sadia and Reb Nissen, when they were Verbrengen, was darf sein der Ziel von Atomim. What is Atomim? What's Atomim? Of course, and they were the role models of Tmimim. Mesiris Nefesh, Bechulu, Mashpiyim. I'll soon get to the Rebbe part of this whole thing, but what's very interesting was the way Reb Sadia verkochen in Tomchet Mimim and Atomim. I remember he repeated this several times. He used to come to visit his son-in-law, Reb Simcha Zirkin, quite often. And he used to talk about Mimim and was heißt Atomim. So he mentioned the way he said it, I remember so clearly. Gehört von Rebbe dem Taten. By him, the Rebbe the Tate was, of course, the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe der Sohn was a Friedrich Rebbe. So gehört von Rebbe dem Taten. Ich habe gewaltet 10 Jahre beim Taten, beim Seiden, bis ich mir Yasset gewinnt am Chitmim. Taten and Seiden was the Rebbe Marash in the Tzemach.
The Rebbe Rashab said that...
Ich habe gewaltet beim Taten, beim Seiden. 10 Jahre bis ich mir Yasset gewinnt am Chitmim.
That means by the oil. He was by the oil of the Rebbe Marash.
He was by the oil. There was one oil there, Rebbe Marash. Yeah. The Tzemach Tzedek was one oil. So there's no question that these people made an impression. I had another Melamed, a very Chassidish Yid, Shalom Bergukov. Shalom Bergukov, I was about 13, 14 in his kitte. I mean, definitely a Chassidish Yid, his whole psiyah. He loved his Talmidim. The love was all over him, and if he had to explain something 10 times, he did it 10 times. And he was makbid in the writing and everything, but everything was mitazah ave, mitazah lipshaft. Today getting a malamed, Baruch Hashem, I have great malamedim over here. But
I was going to say that if anyone doesn't know that you're the head of an institute of Chinuch. So when you talk about Malamdim, you know what it's all about.
Well, so I saw these Tiyurim, and of course it made a tremendous impression. There was one Tziyur that I remember that I can never forget. It was Tafshin Chav Zayin. My Melamed was Rabbi Yankiv Yurkovich. His son is the Rav in Lud. Baruch Bey is Yurkovich, remember him as a Bacher. So, if you know, that Lag Beimer was the Rebbe spoke unbelievable about Eretz Yisrael. The matzav at the time was that the war was anticipated.
6-Day War.
6-Day War. It was in the air, and the rumor had it that Israel, as Yisrael, was preparing 10,000 body bags. Now, every one of my Malamdim was a Nitzul Meshayah. Rabbi Yurkovich was a Nitzul Meshayah.
Survivors.
At the time, we had a Lag Baimer parade. Lag Baimer was on Sunday. We had a Lag Baimer parade in Montreal, and we knew that there was a Lag Baimer parade in New York. The Rebbe was signed by the Lag Baimer parade, but we were not hooked up at the time. The hookups weren't working at the time, not until Tavshin Lamed. So he kept on telling us that we're getting a tape. And I can picture where he was even standing in the classroom. Versteht sich, als Yid, was gewinnt an Nitzel Meshayah, just hearing that there may be another Holocaust. Hagen and Yidden, they're preparing body bags. I mean, he was reliving. He was standing, I can see it, by the light. And we got a cassette tape, the Amolige cassette tapes. And for the class, he's playing the Rebbe's Sicher. Echad Mekem Revova Yedoifu. The Rebbe was like shouting, speaking so loudly. He is standing.
All of you have heard. You had heard what the Rebbe said.
We heard this episode. As an episode, so we were kids. How old was I? 12 years old. And es hat geheißen that we heard that the Rebbe gerät wegen der man sich stürmt sich, and the Rebbe gave a sicher telling us, that there'll be Baruch Hashem, als wir durchgehen b'shalom, v'chulu.
It's the Eberster b'ashitze and shikze
brachas and everything. So he's standing there and he's listening, und bagis sich mit Tränen. With 12-year-olds, the Rebbe speaking, and it made such an impression.
He's crying.
Unbelievable. Well, you got the Sharid, a Grace Lamden, but that gave him so much courage. Listening to the Rebbe, the Vadors from Rebbe, was just unbelievable.
No.
There was one thing growing up there, and I left Lepel when I was 16 years old. I left Etzisrael. That's a whole passion with me.
You left Montreal.
I left Montreal. So, Chaverim were leaving. Had Ahavas Schomberg Garaya, which was Yossi Garaya from Detroit,
From Sao Paulo,
in Brazil.
Yeah, I was on Shlichus in Brazil. So
Okay, so you know.
Yeah.
As that seer, he's an incredible guy. He went to Yisroel, Yossel Schneerson, which used to come often to his Zayda. He lives in LA now.
Yeah,
He used to come often to his Zayda. It was also a Chava we grew up from. I know him from when he was 8 years old. And I heard that he went to Yisroel. Und der Elam hat gewollt folgen. There were some from our kitty. Yossi Kalabach was in my class. There were others that in my class. And Rachmiel Ben Yomis, Rafi Tenenhaus was a bit younger, but then all of them sich zu folgen.
There is Israel.
In Morristown, no.
Bechal, they were going to different places. Okay.
My father told me that he would appreciate if I go to Israel. Have a gala limkum Torah, you know, a Polish Yid, and that resonated with him. At Nishuf gehabt, and sein non zum Rebbe, da greise Meile, you know. But whatever.
You wanted to go to the Rebbe.
He sent a zettel zum Rebbe. And the zettel came with an answer, Im yeshlo yishom kite masimo kedaya dovo.
That's so.
So, and that's so.
1 second. You used to go to the Rebbe Bechlal as a child?
Okay, so I can talk about that. Of course, at Yechidus'n, my father. I'll tell you a story that my father told me about Yechidus'n. Okay, Indian.
We'll hold a note. We have to get back to you going to Eretz Yisrael as a bacher, but
yeah, okay. Yeah. It was a dover a rogel that the Montrealer Yidden von Yitzchok and Simchas Torah, Rosh Hashanah, the Chassidim from Rosh Hashanah. But Simchas Torah and Yitzchok was a given. Remember, even how we used to go, the bus used to take us, and we used to stop in Muncie, gain a mikveh, and there was a story then that Rabbi Isaac Shvei at times went with the bus too. You know, the Malamdim, some of them went by car, but most of them, a bus was a double ruggle to go with the bus. How many had cars to go? Yeah. And we used to come there, so I don't know, they'd stop by a mikveh, and somebody was telling him, if she comes da rein, that's the Zen unser Rebbe. I don't know if you heard this before. So Isaac Shvei said, ich bin nicht gewesen in mikveh. So the guy tells him, bei unser Rebbe darf man nicht kein mikveh. So you could go. Back upon him. So we used to go those 2 times. I remember Tafshin Lamed was a gewaltige Ziel. Tafshin Lamed, we came early Friday morning. Yemot Geven, Friday afternoon, was the Siyum Sefer Torah.
The big Tafshin Lamed, the Siyum Sefer Torah. Kabbal's Prim Sheikh.
So I remember that when the buses pulled up, the Rebbe arrived. So what I recall from that year, that the Rebbe was going up the steps. And the buses, there were 5 Greyhound buses. It was historic. 5 buses, historische Sache. From Montreal at one time, the buses were pulling up, they were lined up in the service lane. And this is what I recall, the Rebbe turning around with such a, it's very difficult, the Rebbe's keres ruach, to be Messiah. But it was unbelievable. You saw, it wasn't a smile. It was like, I remember that clearly. It was a keres ruach. I was already a 15-year-old buck.
Like in English, you'd say pleasure.
Yeah, like a geschmackheit, like a, very hard to describe. Al Kaponim, so Tafshin Lamed, the same thing, Tafshin Lamed Beis. I remember I went with my father. We were sitting next to each other on the bus. And Yud Aleph Nissen, Tafshin Lamed Beis was Yud Aleph Nissen Agadol. It was everyone went. It was before Pesach. And And for me, for my father to go then, like Erev Pesach was a Dover Chiddush, but everyone went Yud Aleph Nissen. It was a so everyone went Yud Aleph Nissen. I remember on the way back, mamish the ganze Weg, bin gesungen Bechar Hashem Chassisi. That niggun resonated so much. You couldn't leave. A ganzen Pesach hat man gesungen dem Niggun Bechar Hashem Chassisi. It was so inspirational. Whatever. I'll tell you, when I was a kid, but it was my father's first time that he went to see the Rebbe was either Tez Zayin or Yud Zayin. I'm not sure.
What year were you born?
I was born in Tez Zayin. Okay.
So a second. So you remember the Rebbe teaching a Niggun Simchas Torah?
The what?
The Rebbe teaching a Niggun Simchas Torah?
I remember the last one.
Well, the
also, not the whole tzir, but the last one.
Yeah, okay.
But listen to this. This is incredible. So my father tells me that there was such a big olam, and Yechidus'n was the night after Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah at night, I remember even that Fabrengens used to finish 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock was late. The letzte Jahren was already like 12, 12:30, even 11:30.
You're talking about the night of Ahavas, the Fabrengen before Ahavas?
No, the night after.
Matzah
Simchas Torah. And the night later, ik ben Yechidus'n. So that year, my father told me, there was so many people going at the Yechidus'n that they made 2 nights for the Montrealer Yidden. And his time to go was the second night. He was supposed to be there 3 o'clock. I don't know when he came. He said he came early, 2:30. I don't know when he came. And he says like this, it's about 2:45. And he's standing like in Ganei Natachten area. And a woman walks, that's how he told me. A Frau is hergekommen from zweiten Stock. It was the Rebbetzin. And she said like this, was willte von dem haben schon mehr wie a Wochzeit nicht geschlafen. Lost him up. Everyone packed out, the door closed.
The Yechidus'n was cancelled. Wow.
Incredible. Now, Kapanim, if you're talking about how Montreal was found some Rebbe.
That's a crazy story. The Rebbe canceled the Yechidus'n. Wow, okay.
That's what my father told me was there.
Wow.
Akapanim. So, Lepoil, what happened was that we used to go often, but I have to admit, the koch in Shlichus, I didn't get in Montreal at all. Now, let's be honest with ourselves. If you're talking about Hoftes, Lamed, Lamed Aleph, Lamed Beis, I left after Pesach, Lamed Beis. It wasn't the normal talk of the day. How many shluchim were there? Shluchim, but maybe there was 10, 12.
It was a select, very select
group.
Select
few, and it wasn't on everyone's agenda. You know what I mean? So therefore, a Verbrengen of the Mashpiyim, Wolf Gringlas, Peretz Mochke, they didn't talk about Shlichus. Chinuch-Hiskashrus of Rebbe, but the Shlichus was not mentioned. So Lepoil, Eretz Yisroel opened up new horizons. Why? I came after Pesach, Lamed Beis. It was about a year after Iyar Lamed Aleph. The Mashpia Hagadol passed away, Reb Shliach. But his vision, his what he tried to get to the Bochurim, Avede and Davening and all that is what the Tzir wasn't talking about at the time. His vision, wie Tom Chetmim and Dafu said. I remember the first Shabbos I was there. It was about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Gesetzt 50 Bochurim gedavened. It wasn't like, really, it was a Tzir. And David Feldman was there at the time. There were other guys over there. Zalman Goppin was a younger man in Kollel at the time. I mean, there was Tziyurim over there, younger light. I mean, Slavatitsky. There was a whole group of Bochurim that came from Koltera. One of them was called Borovsky. One of them was Slavatitsky.
And
The
Halperin
Erech Halperin from the Kfar Chabad. There was a whole group of them, and the one that brought them was instrumental was Yossel Segal.
There was also Greenfeld, was there?
Yeah, Chatzkel Seifer. Yeah. There was a whole group of them. There was another couple of men, I can't name it, but Al Capone, it was a Atzir. And who was the interim type of Mashpia for bringing with the Bochurim? Was Moshe, what was his name? Pasek. So Moshe Pasek was Mashpia. Again, he was a Talmud Muvik, I guess, from Shlomo Chaim. So what did he talk about? He talked about Aveda. Der Zier von Tamchet Mimim hat sich nicht gebeten. Der Zier bleibt Zier, Tamchet Mimim is Tamchet Mimim. That was the language of the Chabad.
It seems very seamless from Montreal to Kfar Chabad. It was similar.
Yeah, similar.
Yeah.
Everything was until Reb Mendel came. And then Label Kaplan, also I can soon talk about that.
When did Reb Mendel come?
Reb Mendel came Mevorchem Achedish Elul, I think.
From what I understand, Reb Mendel was very. From what I understand, the Rebbe was very involved and pushed the idea that Reb Mendel should be the Mashpia.
They said that Reb Mendel told the Rebbe, "Ich bin a Balabas."
Right.
So the Rebbe said, "Aber Chassidische Balabas." So they can gesagt, whatever.
I once heard that there was pushback because Reb Mendel, like Reb Mendel is the famous chassid that everyone knows, but in those days, Shem Chaim and Reb Mendel, it was a different style. Reb Mendel was I don't know.
100%. We'll soon get to that. So Reb Mendel's first Verbrengen, it was advertised, Raya Zegen nach Mittag, nach dem Davenen. So he's going to verbringen the Zaal, alle Bochurim will sein. All the Balabatim from Kfar Chabad came. Junge Leid from Keiler was there, Balabat, everyone was there. And his opening, that's what I remember, his opening words were, in Tamchet Mimim hat man Elul nicht gelernt. When you make such a statement in Kfar Chabad, nicht gelernt is nicht gedavent, like what's going on? This is coming from somebody who's going to be the Mashpia in Kfar Chabad, encouraging the Bochurim, I guess, as a continuation of Reb Shlomo Chaim. And he explained himself. Everyone opened up their eyes, like, what is he talking about? They said like this. In Tamchet Mimim hat me gewusst, wo ist a Chassid, Rosh Hashanah, nicht beim Rebbe. Denn alle gewinnen vernommen. Tonne beseitige Arbeit, kriegen ein paar Rubel.
Everyone's trying to get to the Rebbe now.
Machen Gemilles Chassidim, es wird genommen ein Gemach von dem und von jenem. Und es hat sich getan, hat sich gegeben für uns zum Rebbe. So he brought in such a ruach hervorgegangen zum Rebbe. It made such an incredible impression that Tishrei, it emptied out. I heard there was no meaning in yeshiva. The place emptied out. All of them before.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
I'm just curious to understand. Saying that Mendel came from the same place as all these other people that you're mentioning. So what shift? Why was Mendel different?
I personally think, if you want to know my personal, he had a mashpia, Zalman Moshe. And he spoke so much about Zalman Moshe. He even described to us Gimmel TammuzAnd, and Neville. He was a Bocher at Neville, and Zalman Moshe, and this Zalman Moshe, that he went a meredike mekusha. That's my opinion. He spoke so much about Zalman Moshe, the Hiskashrus some Rebbe, wie gewähnt, some Rebbe nicht mehr. Yeah. I think that had a lot to do. That's my personal opinion. But das hat Davar Boro, gewähnt meredike mekusha zum Rebbe, and net gemont Hiskashrus, net gemont a Bocher da vorn zum Rebbe. Wo ist a Bocher Rosh Hashanah? Nicht vorn zum Rebbe. He didn't even mention, I don't recall, Kabbalah Samachas, but he didn't use those words. Wo ist a Bocher Rosh Hashanah? Nicht vorn zum Rebbe. It was like
Dabra Pashat.
Yeah, Dabra Pashat, da vorn zum Rebbe. Bis zum Mekusha, bis zum Rebbe Zayid, vorn zum Rebbe. Like, it was like such a natural thing. And everyone went to the Rebbe. But Reb Mendel was an incredible type of a mashpia that he did tell a lot of stories of the past. His favorites, Meir Simcha Chain. He once described, can I do this? One of the Fabrengens that he was holding, talk about Meir Simcha. So he told the following story, and he wanted to bring out was meant the Ahavas from Chassidim. What was the Ahavas from Chassidim? They told the following story. He said he was a bocha. Who was the mashpia on Zal? We'll talk about Neville. Meir Simcha lived in Neville. Who was the mashpia on Zal? Mashpia was Nissen Reb Nissen.
So this is after Tivchet Tmimim was left at Astav. We actually recently had an article in Der Her about Neville, this month actually, and so it says over there that the Iker Tivchet Tmimim for that period was in Neville. That was the main Tivchet Tmimim, the main branch.
You know, Gadi told us before I get to Meir Simcha, he told us that it looks like it was a day after Gimmel Tammuz, is angekommen die Idee als der Rebbe Zaruis. Sie haben uns aufgeweckt von Schlaf. Der Rebbe Zaruis. Sie alle gelaufen in Schule. Wir kommen rein in die Schule, Zalman Moshe, ich bin Teitschiker. He said, Zalman Moshe, he used to repeat this many times. Zalman Moshe, ich bin Teitschiker. Sie hat durchgegangen, bis auf Frühmorgen, guys, Herr zu verbringen, Zitzores, dort verschickt in Kastamar.
So the Chatchila, they heard that Fidik Rebbe is free. And then they heard that there's Golos afterwards.
The eine Gol Kastamar, and we don't know how long, whatever. Al Kapadim, he said, Zalman Moshe, like, calm down, you know.
Right.
Moshe, as he used to say, vertrunken in the Welt mit Maschke. You know how to say Lachaim. They said, Zalman Moshe hat gesagt, lebe nicht der ganze Meister. Der Rebbe Zaruis. Und hat getrunken bis Yud Gimmel, Yud Dalet Tammuz, bis es angekommen die Idee, der Rebbe ist im Ganzen befreit. And he said, Yitzchok gesagt.
So it's very interesting because if you learn the Rebbe Shlichus about Gimmel Tammuz, and the Rebbe always explains that even though there was something afterwards, but it's the haschala of the Geula, so maybe it's the beginning, and it's the whole thing is in it. So I'm saying Zalman Moshe was mechaven, he was a Chassidish Yid, he's mechaven to something that the Rebbe would speak about, years later.
By the way, Taka, I have a personal letter from the Rebbe dated Gimmel Tammuz, Tavshin Lamed Vov. So the Gimmel Tammuz. So anyway, we'll leave it for another time. But Akapanim, this is very interesting that if you're talking about Reb Mendel hat a Sach getan in the meaning von Ahavas Yisroel. He spoke a lot about it in many occasions, in 770 with the Bochurim. So he wanted to tell us was the gewähnt der Ahavas von Chassidim. He told us the following thing. He said, gewähnt a Bocher. Der alte Bocher, der Mashpia, gewähnt Reb Nissen. Angekommen a Idee, that Rebbe the Masmid is coming to town, und geht verbringen in Stub von Meir Simcha. So, the anticipation is ein chassidische Verbringen bei Meir Simcha in Stub. A lot of people heard of Meir Simcha. Meir Simcha gewinnt der chassidische Jede, gewinnt jeder Gvir, gewinnt a Chassid, gewinnt had alle Miles, he was a real chassidische Jede. He always spoke about Meir Simcha, Meir Simcha. The Akapadim, the state of Chassidus was from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock in the evening. But gelernt Chassidus in the free, I think he said from 8 to 10. Dann gedaven self, as I say, the nigle bis 7, and then supper, and then 8 to 10 was, maybe he said 9 to 11, I think he said 8 to 10 was Seder Chassidus. So he said that we were Bacham, and we saw that Reb Nissen kommt da rein in Saal 8 Säger und vayifen Pöverchei und hat sich gegeben a Glitch-Horaos und mir gleich gewusst, geht zu Meir Simcha. But we were told that we can't come till 10 o'clock at night bis nach dem Seder. So Reb Nissen's away, gewinn a paar ältere Bochurim, Reb Mendel said, ani beseicham, Megates Reb Meir Simcha. But we're not going to go in because they'll kick us out. So we stand by the fence. It was a summer day or whatever. He says, we come to the window, and he said, unser Mashpia is standing, and etimazei ogevischen. Mamish, he thought, he said, the whole, the Rebbe Yitzchak didn't speak, and his Mashpia, Rebbe, no, Zalman Moshe, was Poshet. He etimazei ogevischen, he said, Mendel said, ich habe gemeint, als die zwei wollen mehr kämen nicht reden zwischen sich. That was it. They're parting ways.
Are you saying to one another?
To one another, they're going to be parting ways. He said the whole time, Rebbe the Masmid didn't say a word. He said, Stena Zega, Punkt auf und Zega, we march in. He said, Rebbe the Masmid tongue him reden, und Zalman Moshe geblieben still. He says, a year later, he meets Reb Nissen. And they're talking, what came up, one of the things was, a Jahr zurück, der Verbringen, der Rebbe the Masmid gewinnt. So he says, Reb Nissen said, Ui, das gewinnt a Verbringen. Ist doch nicht gewinnt bei der ganzen Verbringen. Ui, das gewinnt a Verbringen. Zalman Moshe, And he said, it's as if between them nothing happened. And he wanted to bring out the Ahavas of Chassidim. Here is Zalman Moshe telling Reb Nissen, telling him of Ogevashen, and he said, "Sis given kiloi hoya." Das given von Herzen. So the Ahavas that is what was front and center of this whole thing going.
So
on.
It wasn't pshat that there was a mechila. It was the way when Zalman Moshe told it to Reb Nissen, the Nissen knew it's coming from Ahavas Achem, so it's geschmack.
Yeah.
So I think what the problem maybe by some people today is they only do the first part. They know how to ziddle someone else without the Ahavas Yisroel, right?
Well, there's a whole sikha from the Frierdiker Rebbe about that and whatever. These were talking about mashke and all that when we were in Melbourne. Mizman Lizman. We walked into Shmuel Betzalel Althuis. He wasn't like his brother at all, Pinya Althuis. He was more of whatever. There's a whole history about him. We have his Gunim. At Nogizende Mashke, he was crying already. And he used to say, Today you can't say that. But he said, the Ahavas Achem for Chassidim. It was palpable, but you can't untap him with the hand. Ahavas Achem of Chassidim. Al Kapanim, going back to Reb Mendel, Reb Mendel was two things. Ahavas Yisroel, and Fahren zum Rebbe was a must.
You said saying his Ahavas Yisroel was also to the Bochurim, right?
Explain to the Bochurim for sure. He was so ibigem to the Bochurim. There was kind of one Bocher from Chicago. He ended up in Chicago. He's not around anymore. I don't know what about. His son, he gave the Talmud Bond. He was about Chuvas. Yeah, Elecha, Feiner. Reb Mendel spent so much time with him, learning with him about Gemara. You were able to see Reb Mendel by Ablat Gemara sometimes too. Teaching the Chavim with the Mikorabim, he wasn't going on with them. What was very interesting is how at Gezok Tanya, from 6:30 to 7, at the Gegeb Ashir Tanya. They given mehr gesagt. It wasn't today, guys give shiurim and a face with like kashes and lamdas. The way he said it. It geteicht the Wörter. Versteht sich, geteicht appropriately. Right. But it was the way he said it, the way he sat. It was wie Achsidische Ried Leren Tanya, Zog Tanya. It was a whole different seal.
You mentioned the Shalom Garari, Rabbi Garari from Brazil.
Oh.
So he told me that there was a bacher that was I don't know, today we say he's depressed. I don't know exactly. He wasn't freilich. So that Mendel called over Shalom Agrari. Maybe you remember the story. He called over Shalom Agrari and says, "See this bacher? He needs Epis to be. We need to make him happy. So I want you to do like this. I want you to make a chavrusa with him. The first 5 minutes of the seder, you have to learn every single second. The last 5 minutes, you have to learn every single second. But the rest, I only want you to talk to Varim B'Telem. Du bist a Freilicher. You're going to cheer him up. You're going to make him happy. I want you to only talk to Varim B'Telem." And that was a hayra. The mashpia told him to do it, so he did it.
Yes.
So that's like I can't even see mashpim today doing such a thing. I mean the outlook.
But here comes the part where Shlichus came into the picture. At that time, Label Kaplan was sent by the Rebbe to start a minyan from Keilu Jungeleit in Tzfas. In those days, the roads...
Remind me, what year are we talking about?
We're talking about, as far as I remember, late Lamed Beis, Lamed Gimmel.
Okay.
And in those days, the Nesiah from Tzfas from Kfar Chabad to Tzfas, getting Jungelei to move there was like I'm telling you to move to Honolulu. It was a 4-hour drive. But it was not something that was considered normal. To move away from Kfar Chabad, foreign and Tzfas, wasn't a normal thing to do. And at first, he wasn't Shliach. And I heard, that the Rebbe told him, gave him like an ultimatum. Oder du machst ein Minyan, oder komm zurück und fertig. That's what I heard. I don't know how true it is, as I've been gehört. So Reb Mendel invited him to come to Kfar Chabad on Shabbos. Wird sitzen mit den jungen Leuten von Keilu, mit den Bochurim. Und tu was du darfst, and get them to come, no? So I remember who was sitting by the table, a Lefgivker, a Köy, and Zalman Gup, and these were all junge Leute in Keilu. Second year Keilu, third year Keilu, whatever it was. I think Zalman Gup came to Keilu maybe Chavtes, even, whatever. Al Kapanim, but he was in Keilu then. The junge Leute was sitting around and talking, and Reb Mendel sitting here, and Label sitting next to him. And Reb Mendel told him to say L'chaim, which he did, a lot of L'chaim, and he took over the show. Reb Mendel was elbowing him, Zogze, and he started to speak about the Tayakite from Shlichus. Was meint Shluchis Shalodem Kamesei? We never heard such words, I can tell you. Being somebody, a Talmud from Montreal that started when I was 5 years old. I never heard such things before. Et hat geredet wegen der Tayakite von Shlichus. Was heißt, ich begeben zum Rebbe, Shluchis Shalodem Kamesei. I remember the highlights of the words that he used. Wie kann ein junger Mann nicht fahren auf Shlichus? And he's talking to guys that, in their minds, this was an ungefährte Sache. Not even a question. Those same guys, he was targeting those chevre. They were sitting in Keilu. Rabbi Avram Hersh Kohen was a Yidder Geisa Goyen. He was the Rosh HaKeilu. That wasn't the subject matter that he spoke. And Sigvena Zeva Dova Chodesh for them. That gave the Bochurim, myself, such a cheshik of Shlichus, Vosse Shlichus, Ven Shlichus. What does it all mean to us? The Rebbe geben zum Rebbe, that I can tell you honestly, that was the first time that it resonated as medafon of Shlichus. He gave in that thing. I mean, you can ask anyone who was in Kfar Chabad before, at the time, or before, Shlichus, all that, it was not in the cards. I mean, it wasn't the Neusei Dvorim was Mashpiyim am Gerät when they were verbrannt.
So let me ask you a question. I think by the Bochurim that learned in 770, like even in the Yuds, or especially in the Yuds, that was something that they talked about. But I think maybe because they were hearing directly from the Rebbe, I'm saying, I don't know. I don't know.
I can't ask you because I was young. The Chafs, I remember Simchas this, but I don't.
Right. No, I'm basing this on, I heard from, so I was told directly by someone that was a Bach in the Yuds, I'll say it was. I heard from Baral Shem Tov told me, and I think he's say Bechlal, that when he was a Bacher, that's what they used to fabring about, going on Shlichus. But I guess that was their little secret. Him and Gershom Mendel and Leibor Askin, they knew about this, but the cloud.
You can count them on your finger.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
On your. So Al Kaponim, that's when a lot of it started, and it started to resonate. Lepeil Elo Lamed Gimel. I ended up in New York, and in Chevet V'Teira, which was the place where you went first before 770. Afterwards,
was that like that was the kvutza?
I wasn't even. Yeah, I was still 17 in Elo then. So that's where we went. And who was sitting in Zal at the time was Rabbi Mentlik. Mentlik was a mayor of the Ketzir. And by the way, I lately heard from one of my chaverim that he heard it from somebody who saw it. You talk about Rabbi Mentlik. That Rabbi Mentlik, I think you're allowed to tell the story in Memuzah. That Rabbi Mentlik was once Friday night walking out of 770, and he lived like in Kingston over there, where is his house, and in front of his house, he saw a blettel from the Chinuch-Hiskashrus on the floor. Have you ever heard this?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Some das da bewusstermeister. Anyway, he looked into the halacha shebedavar, and he did what he did, and given a tifer chassidische rid. He walked around with his gartel, and he walked around. He was always saying something, Mishnayos, Balpeh, whatever. But then the Fabrengens turned into different types of Fabrengens. Shlomo was at the beginning of his hashpah and all that. He was there already 2-3 years. Zalman Lapkovsky given the mashkiach, and but Beikidach given Reb Shlomo Zachi, and he made a tremendous impression on us. And don't forget that he was a Talmud Muvik of Rabbi Yitzchak. So
Rabbi Yitzchak wasn't mashpia in 770.
Rabbi Yitzchak used to give shiurim in 770. I heard Samach Vav from Rabbi Yitzchak in 770. Okay. But Rabbi Yitzchak there was a lot of inconsistency. That he used to be 6 weeks, 7 weeks, then he stopped and on and stuff. Mm-hmm. It wasn't consistent. But the one who gave us shiur, the first year I heard was Tafshin Ches. I learned by Rabbi Shlomo Zachi, and he gave a shiur. It was the Hemshech from Pesach, Chai Lahachis, Chai Be'etzem. That's the first, and that was Elul Lamed Gimel. His Fabrengens was totally different. I'm telling you what resonated. Everything was about his kashrus. Learning Chassidus was about his kashrus, and davening was about his kashrus. Und übergegeben zum Rebbe. It wasn't necessarily about Shlichus, but it was his kashrus, the übergegebenkeit zum Rebbe. And versteht sich, then there was side, it was getting already on in time, and from time to time we heard Rabbi Gaelik from Italy from in 770s, ein übergegeben zum Rebbe, Shlichus. So then, Shlichus and Ibegegeben zum Rebbe became one thing. As you're getting older, was heißt Ibegegeben zum Rebbe? Sicher lernen Rebbe's Mamorim, all of the Sachen, Sichers were coming out every week. But the Ibegegeben zum Rebbe. The Ibegegeben zum Rebbe, as you're getting older, 20, 21. But then in the middle, I was 19 and a half. So that's when I went on Shlichus to Melbourne for 2 years.
So when you were called in by Rabbi Chadakov, right? This was you're waiting.
Not
for
Chadakov,
Binyamin. So you're waiting for this moment.
You know what? It's very easy. We're waiting. That's a hungem Sushkin. Oder Nissen, that now's the time when we would climb Bochurim from Australia.
Was that the only Shlichus group then?
I think at the time there was also Miami and Miami.
Okay.
But thinking that I will be picked, I didn't think I will be picked. That's the honest truth. I'm just done practically. I didn't think that to be, but he called me in. And after that whole Shlichus, we understood that it's mamish. I don't know how the Rebbe picked names, but it was after we finished our Shlichus, Chaim Gutnick, who was the one that used to communicate with the Rebbe, write to the Rebbe about the yeshiva and shluchim v'chulu v'chulu, he got an answer from the Rebbe, this was published already. And so there wasn't going to be shluchim, but months later...
meaning that till now...
Yeshiva can exist without shluchim. B'peil mamish, what happened was that they wrote a letter to the Rebbe, Reb Chaim Gutnick, and he wrote that given sheyotza tzav meis hamelech shlo shluchim matziyim anu, whatever he wrote. So the Rebbe's answered him, he told me this several times, lo hoisa tzav klal uklal ela shlo shluchim al yodi ela k'mei shluchei melach v'teres emes. That was the answer. So we heard this answer. It was a good feeling,
This is before you went.
After we went.
So that means that till now, the Rebbe was choosing each person.
Or shluchim al yadi. And then, so we heard this, was interesting. The Al Kapanim, there was, and I wrote about this, that there's no question, because of the time that Groner spent with us, Leila Shleimim, Rabbi Yitzchak Wolf, there's no question that one of the mataras was to hear from a Zayid. He was versteht sich am Kushitz Rebbe. Every Thursday night, we used to sit in his house, sometimes till Eirabay Kamamish, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Was Zayin Zechenis, the Inyonim that he had. I mean, everything is published today already, with tapes and everything. Alles was it gehad from Rebbe. One of the things, again, Shlichus, that was so, at the beginning of his Shlichus, he was a Shliach in Buffalo, New York. In Buffalo, New York, he wasn't that matzliach.
There was a school there.
Whatever it was. I didn't know what a Shlichus was. I'm talking about Tafshin Yud Beis, Yud Aleph Yud Beis. So he was a Shliach there. He wasn't that matzliach. And he came back to the Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe that Pasha is nicht matzliach. So what happened was, the Rebbe told him, Kadvar Me'elen, he repeated this many times. A chassidische junger Mann darf jeden alle Tag oder vor Bichas HaShachar oder nach Bichas HaShachar sich mit Zaya sein, die Zure von Rebbe. And the Rebbe started crying. There's no question that all of these stories and what he had, the Shlichus from Rebbe, gave even more a chukka. We're already getting older. And when you're 20, 21, you start thinking a bissel weiter too, And yeah, that's a dova pasha, but I found of Shlichus. I mean, wie anders, you know what I mean? Ahavas is min abacha of not Shlichus, to prepare for Shlichus. So we heard a lot from Rabbi Yitzchak, and it really resonated time and again. And before we went into Yechidus'n, going to Australia, so the Rebbe said that morning that the Allah was in the Gewen of Shlichus in Australia should come in with us. And
in the past,
also, the previous group, we were the fifth group.
That
means the four groups before us.
And Lezer Tzeitim was part of your group?
Was the previous group.
Okay.
My group was Ari Chitrik, Levi Weinberg, Yossi Friedman, that group of Mifegerstadt. So what happened was, the Rebbe also said that Rabbi Yitzchak Wolf, he should also come in. So we came in, they told us to come in the first. When we came in, I was in Yechidus before this several times.
By the way, a mental note, I want to hear about the Yechidus'n.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happened was we come into the room and there's butcher paper covering all of the Rebbe's desk. But we came in first, the room fills up. There were 22 people in the room. So if this is, we come in and the Rebbe is standing and you can only see the Rebbe like from here and up because the table was covered. And it was covered like 1.5 feet or like more than a foot. So if the Rebbe is standing here, I ended up standing here, Yossi Gerari next to me. And this part in front of the Rebbe was not covered with butcher paper. Mistamed, those that prepared the room, thought that no one is going to stand over here and see what's going on here. They're going to be standing behind the desk. But Lepeil, he read Elam, they will stand there. The table, at least 2/3, 3/4 of the table was full of svarim. And the last Chinuch-Hiskashrus of the table, the last, like 1/3 or whatever it was, 1/4, 1/3, was tzetlach, envelopes, and newspaper clippings. But to see that was like unbelievable. Later on, Rabbi Yitzchak Wolf told us that he heard from his brother, Label, that there are shiurim that the Rebbe has, a minute, 2 minutes, 2 minutes in different svarim, and quickly the table fills up. And at times the Rebbe tells Label to get a sefer. If it's more than a minute or two and he comes back, the Rebbe's already learning something else already, was as on the table, other things already. And gerade, interesting, Binyamin Klein, I once went, I once went back from the oil with him. So I asked him, so he tells me that once, it was about 2:45, and Minchas 3:15. So a Yid, a Litvish Yid comes with a Sheinem Sefer of Shulchan Aruch, and he wants to bring it into the Rebbe. He wants to bring it into the Rebbe. He said, you can't just walk into the Rebbe. I'm going in with the mail in a couple of minutes. Whoever saw the mailman coming in, sometimes with 2 sacks, sometimes with 1 sack. So mail was always a big thing, but he told me, Svarim Kuntresim was always the first thing the Rebbe looked at. Always. So he says he took that sefer in with the mail, and Weiss the Bochurim told the fellow that he was carrying Weiss more than one sefer.
He wrote the sefer, or is it?
Yeah, he wrote the sefer. He was the mechaber. Mm-hmm. But he had the other copy of the sefer with him. Said that when the Rebbe comes out to Mincha, so stand in the lobby over there, in the front room, and the Rebbe will see you. You're holding the sefer. This time it's you. And the Rebbe walks out 3:50. The Rebbe walks by him. And the Rebbe for a second, stopped. Gedruckt a ganze sefer auf Shulchan Aruch, nicht einmal dem Mann dem alten Rebbe. And the Rebbe walks by. Gerade my Schwer, something similar, not totally. My Schwer was a Yothim at the Ahavas Shalom, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Moshe Ahavas Shalom, who recently passed away. So his great uncle was called the Sune Kedayin, Reb Mordke Gershon Spalter. Gewinn a Zier von Amol, a Greiser Rov. He wasn't a Lubavitcher Chassid, but he was a Mekurev, verteilen in some Rebbe, Malayor, Yechidus'n, whatever. So he wrote a sefer, and he wanted the Rebbe to look at it, and the Rebbe will give him an askama. So when he went into Yechidus'n, I guess it was before it was published, my Shver was outside. He didn't go into Yechidus'n, but it was outside, maybe in the Natach, wherever he was. And he told him right away the story. And he said that he walked in with a 30-40 Blätter in his own handwriting. And he said that the Rebbe went mamish like this. Looked at the page, turned the page, took about 2-3 minutes, went through everything. My Shver said that the Ksav was for an alter read that you can hardly read.
Right.
And the Rebbe mished the Blätter.
And
And he says to the Rebbe says to him, so good, he sollte es drucken. So he says, Lubavitcher Rebbe, ich meine, he sollte es durchlernen. So the Rebbe said, that's what he told the Rebbe, said that the Chesed hat nicht geguckt. And the Rebbe gives him ha'aris on what he has written in those 30 pages.
wow.
So he went out of Yechidus. He said, Azat Kop, Azat Fisa. He said, he saw Gedele Yisroel before the war, but he never.
But everyone says that by Yechidus that the Rebbe would, when the Rebbe would read your zettel, the Rebbe would just, in 1 second, read the whole thing.
Yeah. Gerade, talking about the Rebbe, it was in Memches after the Rebbetzin passed away. So at the time, maybe it was Memtes already, at the time, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yisroel Bekarski, was given dem Rebbe Chassid. He was the Rebbe Chassid. And he came to Chicago because his Zivik Sheni had children in Chicago. He had a son in Chicago, Abramowitz. I get a call from Reb Daniel Moskowitz, Olav Shalom. There's a lot to talk about Reb Daniel, given a Chashiv Shliach. And he calls me and he says, the Rosh Yeshiva is in town. And he got a call, I don't know from whom, that we should go over to him and visit him. And so I went with him. We went to this Abramowitz's house, and we meet him there. And of course, he knew who we were. And
you knew from 770.
Yeah. I got a smicha from him if I had me several times, or whatever, the normal thing. So he knew who I was. He knew who Reb Daniel was, too, Sakapani was very comfortable. And he was speaking about the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin passed away. He said to us, ich verstehe dem Rebbe, like whatever. But then he told us like this. He said, ich hab gekannt alle Gedoyle Yisroel Vater Muhammad. And he starts naming them. Reb Menachem Zember, the Belzerov, the Bobovo, the Amishanovo, the Alexander Rebbe. He went through the whole list. Everyone that he knew. He said
he learned in Chachmei Lublin by Meir Shapiro. Yeah.
He said like this: the Belzerov are tzaddik. The Bobovo, if I remember, he said the Bobovo. He said, "Gonna kliga eat." That Reb Menachem Zember are guin. He named the other ones. I forgot already what he said about the others. Oba ish shahakelboy a ish ashkoilis. I remember clearly. He said, "No, the Rebbe." He said, "I kenne doch dem Rebbe." He said, "I kenne dem Rebbe." He said how the Rebbe told him he should print the Chikra Halachos, and the Rebbe didn't get him. And Al Kaponim, what happened was, he says, "Ich kenne dem Rebbe. Ich gewähne auf Yechidus'n Sach mit dem Rebbe. Ich bin weggefuhren," he says. Before I left town, I used to go into Yechidus. The beginning.
In previous years.
Previous years, yeah. So he said, Ish Ashkoilas, Aguin in Nigle, Aguin in Ista, Aguin in Avis Yisroel, Aguin in Yonah da Alme. Wie ihr redt mit dem, dort is Aguin, he said. And he really, he didn't have to be Yoitzer for us. We were like young guys, I'm talking already 30-some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very taken by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe was mechabed him a lot, but, at Verstand alone, Gerade talking about him, when I was in Yeshiva in Montreal, going back a bit, Rabbi Hirschsprung used to give us a shir Matlu Shabbos, Mishnayos.
Rabbi Hirschsprung was the Rosh Hashiva of the Yeshiva, or he was like a guest Rosh Hashiva? What was
you know what? Isaac Shvei handled with the Rosh Hashiva, but he gave a shir klali every week.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the Beichen, if I had us.
He was part of the faculty officially.
Yeah, he was the best Beichen. Val, because he gave the question, he gave the answer. Who Meisiv, who Mefarik, he did everything. He was so excited when it came to learning. Also hat gesagt, der Kaschen hat schon gesagt, im Terrazeug, he was...
I heard from someone in
learning.
Montreal that he would drive him to, I think Chaim Treidel, I think, that he would drive him to Montreal to Fabringen sometimes, and he'd sit in the back with the Gemara the entire time, the whole trip.
So what he told us was that he spoke about himself, and then he spoke about the Rebbe. So about himself, he spoke that he told us when he was 16 years old, bin ich schon gewesen a Buki b'Shaf. He said he met the Chinuch-Hiskashrus, that was his Rebbe or whatever. And the Chinuch-Hiskashrus met him, he was 16 years old, and he said to him, Pinjale, Hera, de kennst Shas. So, aber gemacht mit dem Kopf, he says. I acknowledged it. So then he asked me, he said, that bei mir gefragt, 8 Scheiles in Bekies, hat alle geantwortet. Noch habe ich gefragt, ich kann bei euch fragen. So, Scheiles in Bekies. So the Chinuch-Hiskashrus said to him, frag. He said, 4 hat gewiss antworten, 4 hat nicht geantwortet. Und ich habe ihn gleich gebeten, Mechila. that he put him on the spot. They started to talk about the Rebbe. He said, Bechlal, ich bin gewesen beim Satmeruf, beim Rebbe, habe geredet mit seinen Lernen. Alle Männer habe ich etwas gehabt. He said, mit dem Rebbe, habe viele gefragt dem Rebbe, wie sie steht, Chabad Shas. He said. In the Rebbe, I think he said Baba Basra, but I'm not sure.
Chabad, the word Chabad?
The word Chabad Simen. Simen Chabad, Simen. So he said, the Rebbe in his learning, Achad B'Dorah. And his thing, there was a lot of things that he said about the Rebbe, wie the Rebbe's Lekitisiches, the alle Maramekoimis, the Maramekoimis, verkochen, the Maramekoimis from Rebbe. Ich quick allemal the Maramekoimis because he loved seeing it. He was very taken by the Rebbe. I heard that the last Siyum Hashas, they didn't invite him because of Shlichus to Lubavitch. So he said that Reb Meir Shapira wollte gelebt, wollte man Moichet nicht eingeladen.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. So anyway, I'm being sidetracked. But anyway, with him and the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Pekarsky. Rabbi Pekarsky was a very interesting Rosh Yeshiva. I remember once, I don't know if it's Negeya, I remember once he was sitting in Zal, and sie gewinnen einmal Kanim in Zal in 770, they knew what to learn. Some good
Kanim.
The Kanim, yeah, there was Kanim in Nigla, the Shiva
what was the Kanim started like in the Yuds. The
Yuds, yeah. Avremel Shemta was one of the Kanim.
Yes, the Rebbe wanted certain Bochurim to become masters in Torah. That's the idea, right?
Correct.
So what was the say that you have to give a shir?
You have to give a shir. So I remember he was giving a shir, Rabbi Pekarsky, and said, "Du a klal in ganz Shas." So Yitzchok Goldberg is sitting there, and he says, "In wo der klal in ganz Shas?" So he caught him off guard. So he says, "Ich weiß nicht, wie zu sichern, ich soll ihn nicht treffen." That was typical him, auf dem Polischen Derech,
Mm-hmm.
But Al-Kapana, he was a Chassidish Yid. He was the Rebbe's a Chassid, no questions about it. You see in the early pictures, wie it's gestupt beim Rebbe. Anyway, so then that was the Shlichus in
Australia.
The Shlichus in Australia.
But then you came back to 770?
And in Australia, yeah. We came back to 770.
I said we're going to talk about, I don't know if you want to, but what happened when you were in Yechidus'n, when you were a kid?
I'm going to come back to that. I just want to finish this part before we get to the other Shlichus. So I want to finish with Melbourne. When we came back was Nisan, early Nisan, Lamed Zayin. That's when we came back. And by the way, the Rebbe told us when we were in Yechidus'n, he gave us $100 and said, and that was Chof Gimel Ira, ich will haben a gedruckten Krebitz Chidusche Teure. Eine soll bei mir sein, a gebundenem, bis Yud Gimmel Tammuz, und a zweiter Rosh Hashanah. We were giving shiurim hours a day. Niglich, Sidis, Girse, Ian. And we came Erev Shavuos.
The Rebbe used that lashon? I want it.
Ich will haben, He said, and he repeated it straight, Anishom mit schicken the Geld. Twice he repeated it. You can see in the Rishim, in the Anachar. You bet we had it ready. And we worked with the local Bach, we did it ourselves, whatever, we did. So anyway, we come back, and we asked the Rebbe what we should do in the summer.
When you came back after 2 years in Australia?
2 years in Australia. So in those 2 years, you can't go anywhere and nothing. So Al Kapanim, we asked the Rebbe what we should do in the summer. The Rebbe's answer was Lishor b-770. And really, it was an incredible summer. First of all, the Verbrengen in 770 it was kamat viledig. I mean, you had a couple of hundred people, maybe. There were two benches and the shvil. And
because everyone's at Shlichus or in camp or in the country or whatever.
The Rebbe saw everything. He's not a guzman. The Rebbe always saw everything. But then was, excuse me, was a smaller elam. So I remember the head of Beitar from Melbourne came to town. I knew him.
What is Beitar?
Beitar is a Zionist group.
Mm-hmm.
But Akapaner came to town and he knew me from Melbourne, so I invited him to come for Shabbos. He came for Shabbos. I got him a place. And then by Verbrengen, I sat him down by the end of the benches, and I stood by the last leaf of the bench. And between the siches, I mamish bent down. I don't think the Rebbe could have seen me. And I gave him over tamses of the siches. And the Rebbe was so mechav of that sitzt der fremde Mensch, and you're attending to him. You know, there's no thing for them to hear. There's a Shabbos. It wasn't a hookup. It wasn't. And Verbrengen is about to end. The Rebbe goes.
They pointed to you.
Yeah, but I didn't think it's to me, so I just turned around because there was a shtik loilam in the back. The Rebbe goes again. The Rebbe told me to say l'chaim and him to say l'chaim. It was a meredik feeling that the. How can I tell you? The Rebbe's every smile was, not a smile. The Rebbe, I remember the Rebbe walking home Thursday nights late. The Rebbe said, "Zugait in the Siche, whatever." Late. We were up always 7:70 at night. Thursday night was normal for game Verbrengen spät, you know, 14:14, 14:8. There was always things going on. The Rebbe's walking out of the room, always, most of the time, with a bag, with one of these big envelopes, these manila envelopes, a big one, a small one. The neimus that you felt was undescribable. I know, it became a Shkeven and Gan Eden, but the just stop it. When we walked the Rebbe home on Friday night, Yitzchok, Freitag war Nacht, Shabbos. We walked the Rebbe home. The Rebbe's walking, the Rebbe's face, we walked behind the Rebbe, but watching the Rebbe come out, it was just unbelievable. It was. And you couldn't get tired looking at the Rebbe. You just couldn't get tired. I remember as a kid, I came, the first Shabbos tshuva, hey, Vov Tishrei. So we came Friday, hey Tishrei, Vov Tishrei was Shabbos. It was Tafshin Chavav. It was the first yard fight of the Rebbe Tzachana. We were kids. You know, I've seen the Rebbe before that. Then we came Simchas Torah too. But then it was the first yard fight. There was a bus of kids came. We were standing. How old was I? 10, 11. You know, kids 11 want to play. You know, we couldn't take our eyes off the Rebbe. It was like glued to the Rebbe. What did we see? Then the Rebbe. But it was like such a hano. I know the Rebbe was against Mekukta for Mekukta.
Right.
There was such a Hanor Ruchnius looking at the Rebbe. It was just unbelievable. Whatever, it's a weite gesagt. So,
I don't know if it's a Seite gesagt, maybe it's a Ikke gesagt.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying it's so anyway, so the Rebbe told us this day, I remember Tisha B'Av, so people came in already, some people from the country or whatever. But that whole Zman was such a reich Zman, sitting, that Mincha Ma'ariv, we didn't have, there was no davening Shlichus with the Rebbe other than Monday and Thursday. But Monday and Thursday, the upstairs was not crowded. It wasn't crowded.
It was 10 o'clock.
Yeah. So it was just watching the Rebbe. It was like a tiny gruchni. It was like you're in Gan Eden, you know what I mean? Like you're watching. A Yid gesagt, Yossel Segal told me, Yossel Segal was a Yerushalmi. And he said, he used to come often for Simchas Torah. By the way, he stays in my house every year for the past 30 years. He comes to Chicago. That's Shana Meises from Rebbe. He said he used to stand by a kofas. And he said, at that time, you didn't need Gan Eden. Vet getracht wegen Gan Eden, Mashiach. You had Mashiach Gan Eden in full display. This was it. You didn't need more. What do you need more? The guy that talking, he said a kofas. I remember an incident. I don't know when this was, Lamed Aleph, Lamed Beis, I don't recall. But I wanted to see Ma'ariv Simchas Torah, Banacht, Leil Simchas Torah. I want to see Leil Simchas Torah, so I know I'm going to miss out on going to the Talucha early, so I'm going to go to East Flatbush. East Flatbush, Hecht, and Shul coming.
Smart boys.
Yeah, but it's smart boys. Okay. So I wanted it out. So I was inside, and of course, the Bochum, the Bahalt. By the way, I don't think there were more than 30 people inside. There's all upstairs. When the elderly.
The Rebbe davened upstairs.
Yeah, Ma'ariv the Rebbe davened upstairs.
Because the setting up the downstairs was set up for Fabringen.
Yeah, the Rebbe davened upstairs, Ma'ariv. Shmina says Ma'ariv was downstairs.
Right.
Simchas Torah was up. And always Shmina says, some of the Rebbe comes in, puts down the siddur, and he turned around with a nickname. And where the Rebbe stood Friday was not where he stood Beis Vehei, but Kriyas Torah.
Right, Beis Vehei, the Rebbe was right by the door, by the hallway, by the magnet, and Shabbos, it was on the other side,
Yeah. So what happened was, the Rebbe comes in, and if you know, there's a door next to the Omid, wo der Chasen steht. That door was open maybe a half an inch, or maybe less, because there were a lot of Bochurim outside in Jungeleit that some sich geschämt reinkommen. So they stood outside, and the door was open. You were able to see Mamish the Rebbe. So hat ausgeguckt, wie der Rebbe bemerkt nicht.
Mm-hmm.
The Rebbe puts down the siddur, and the Rebbe says, don't ask me what niggin, but one of these negunim, Simchas Torah, the negunim. Suddenly the Rebbe goes like this. The Elam soll gehen nach Rikud, the Bima. Can you imagine? It's the only time I ever saw that in my life. So when the Rebbe did that, there was some excitement. But gewollt gucken dem Rebbe, so you were circling the Bima, geguckt auf den Rebbe, whatever. The door opened up from so much, maybe 3/4 of an inch. Plötzlich, the Rebbe walks to the door, opens up the door, and goes like this. Alle sollen reingehen. And everyone started dancing. Whoever was there ran in. A lot didn't, but there was there ran in. Wow. It's a tzir from Simchas Torah. I also mentioned, I remember talking about Simchas Torah in our kofas. I remember once the shul was like a third of the shul. So you know how the shul was built in
3 installments.
Yeah, there's like 3 apartment buildings that the basement.
There's the shalash.
Yeah, so it was only the
784 and 788.
That was still about Chav Zayin. I don't know when Chavav, Chav Zayin, or whatever. Then they built the next ones.
The Lamedalet.
Lamedalet, yeah. Lamedalet they built it, not
so,
before.
Yeah. The last one.
The last one, right? Yeah, the last one was up.
Yeah.
But then only the first one was standing. I remember also when I came Vav Tishrei, I remember clearly I was standing in the back by the colored windows watching the Rebbe. Akapanim, so what was I in the middle? I lost my train of thought.
So you're saying that when you came downstairs, it's just the first part of 770.
Oh, that's first time. So it's Simchas Torah Banacht, and the Rebbe is in the middle of Farbrengen, and the Rebbe stands up to dance. Suddenly, abruptly, the Rebbe stopped. The Rebbe said, looked at God, zwei Yidden schlagen sich. And it was like a hush, And then the Rebbe continued. So these are things that the Rebbe noticed everything. And there was by Ahavas many times, as you know, and the fat when it grew, when much more people came from different parts of the world, it was
different nationalities.
Okay, so it used to be the Seder that by that when it came to Yom HaLedes, you went into Yechidus. So I went once as a kid with my father.
Not for your Yom HaLedes.
What? Before my Bar Mitzvah.
For your father's Yom HaLedes?
No. I don't know when my father went in. It was huge about time. But I went in Yechidus with my father.
Okay.
I was 8 years old, 9 years old. So I don't remember much, only the Rebbe sitting by the table. Mir redt wegen 60 Jahre zurück, by the way. And then I went in for my Bar Mitzvah. The Bar Mitzvah was short, was interesting because I went in after my Bar Mitzvah, right after. My Bar Mitzvah is Dalet Tishrei. So I wasn't there for Elul. My father was going to go Simchas Torah. I went in right after Simchas Torah with my father. And the Rebbe just said one word. Gegeben Stocke jenem Tag und gesagt der Maimer and this and yes, said the Maimer, but the Rebbe didn't fire me the Maimer, or like he did to others and all that. The Rebbe just asked him in Hoge Yom HaLedes and gesagt der Maimer, and that was it. Like every year thereafter, 14, 15, and 16, I went in right after Tishrei. Don't ask me why. I didn't go in Elul. I don't know.
Elul was no Yechidus, no?
Elul was no Yechidus, but Chofov I could have gone in. But I was in Eretz Yisrael when I was... No, then I was in Montreal. I was in Montreal camp. Could be. That's why.
I think the Rebbe didn't have Yechidus in Elul.
No, but not only in Elul. I could have gone in Av or could have gone in Tammuz, but I didn't.
You went in
I'm just telling you, my I went after that. All these Yechidus'n were very short. Remember once I asked the bracha for my mother, asked this, but nothing extraordinary, except by the... when I was 18, I asked the Rebbe about... the Rebbe always looked at the... There was a time the Rebbe looked at the zettel of the Anhola and all that. First, as you came in,
you had to give the zettel from Anhalda, right?
Yeah. And when I was 18, I asked the Rebbe about, because after I came back from Eretz Yisrael, I asked the Rebbe about putting on film, putting on Rabbeinu Tam. Then everyone asked the Rebbe Rabbeinu Tam when you were 18. It's interesting. I didn't put it on my 18th Yom HaLedes, which was Dalet Tishrei. I don't know why I should have, but I wanted to be in Yechidus and asked the Rebbe first, so I asked the Rebbe in Yechidus. I wrote in, the Rebbe said, sag gleiche Sach, unter der Rabbeinu, das was du fragst, wegen Rabbeinu Tam, a gleiche Sach unter Rabbeinu Tam's show.
Then later it changed, Tafshel Lamed Vav, the Rebbe said everyone should do it from
then the Rebbe said Lamed Vav. But it's interesting, because when I came back from Australia, I had no Yechidus. There was no, but then was right away Lamed Ches. Lamed Ches was right away after I came back.
After
Lamed Ches, after the summer was Lamed Ches. So that's a whole separate parsha, Lamed Ches, right? And the Rebbe said the Siches in the Rebbe's room, and all of that. So it was Bemes. And then came the Shlichus, which I had very interesting things. the Shlichus in Detroit, I have to say, the Shvache Shel Rebbe Shem Tov.
One second, when did you get married?
I got married Ches Sivan Lamed Ches. So
Lamed Ches.
yeah, so Gadam, my parents were in the Gan Eden Atachten, my mother and my father. So he gave them a shviger, and he gave them all brachas. But to my mother he said, "Lange gesunde Jahren," and she lived till she was 90. Yeah, and she had, lived a long and nice life. So I got married in Lamed Ches. And just to point out how the Rebbe knew everyone who's there, even in the later years, as the crowds were so big. I'm not saying a Chiddush. The Chiddush is when the Rebbe takes note of it and tells you about it. That's the Chiddush. So in Mem Zayin, I was going to go to Russia, Mitam Ezrasachim.
You're saying you're already living in Chicago.
I'm already in Chicago, yeah.
You're doing a special trip, a special trip.
Yeah. So I'm going to Russia, and I was in New York. It was going to be after Shavuos, and after Shavuos, I was first in New York for about several days to get some training, preparation, was mir meg sagen, was mir tonne sagen, whatever. It was still the beginning of glasnost. So it was very important that you don't talk what you're doing, and you don't tell them what you're doing. Glasnost.
What is
when the former Soviet Union began to westernize, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But Al Capone said we still have to be very careful. We only have to stay in the hotels and not speak in the hotels what we want to speak. So I came in then, and then I was going to meet my shutev. That was the first guy, Plotkin, who went as a former Russian. They wanted to see whatever. They sent him first time, somebody who left Russia, of a Polish passport, went.
They wanted to see if it works.
Yeah, and see how it works, yeah. So I didn't go that Sunday to Dallas. I was in Chicago. I was going to meet him in the middle of the week at JFK, and from there go to Russia. So he goes by.
Can I just ask you a question? They were taking a shliach from his shlichus to go to Russia. That was. Yeah, I mean, you weren't the only one. Now that I think about it,
shluchim went. Yeah.
It wasn't only shluchim, but also shluchim. Yeah.
Also shluchim. Yeah. Rabbanim went. This, whatever. Yeah. Akabar shluchim went. Of course, shluchim went.
Yeah.
Like Shapiro went several times.
Shmolu went. Yeah.
Shmolu, yeah, they all went. I went to Mem Zayin. Some of my friends went. My shvager went. Hashi Spalter went. And he went at the time where there was the Chernobyl reactor and all that.
Right.
Al Capone walks by the Rebbe Plotkin, and the Rebbe asks him, "Who is dein Shutev?" He says, "Er ist in Chicago." So the Rebbe said, "Ich verstehe nicht. Die ganze Mishpache da verchassene und geblieben in Chicago?" The Mishpache was there because my niece got married to Edelman, whatever. One of the Turks got married to Edelman. So I just came, and I wasn't going to come again. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, Baruch Hashem, with grace of Mishpacha, so I wasn't going to go. But the Rebbe said, and Shabbos was a big crowd, like every Shabbos, and the Mems was a big crowd. The Rebbe Punkezen, that my father was there, and my mother was there.
And that you're related and the whole thing.
Yeah, whatever. The ganze Mishpacha da, for Simcha, der geblieben in Chicago.
Wow.
So from then, the Rebbe saw everything that was going on. There were times that when the Rebbe walked into Tillim, the Rebbe really looked around and knew who was there. Shabbos and Baruch not there. The Rebbe once went into the Zal when I was a Baruch upstairs in 770. Kapanim, so where are we at?
So you're talking about shlichus.
I want to tell you also, I think it's negeya for Jungeleit and Shlichus to know this. Very negeya. I was a shliach in Michigan, the Cheder, for 3 years. I used to write in a lot to the Rebbe about my experience over there, the relationship with Rebbe, and Rebbe is Elohim Arichas Yomim, V'Shalom Tevis. He's the Rebbe's Chassidim. So there was a lot that I learned from Rebbe, Chinuch-Hiskashrus of Bochurim. But then there were times that we've had, let's put it this way, our disagreements. And I wrote to the Rebbe a lot about it. And once I wrote a lot. That was from my last settle, the Gabadat Shlichus. And the Rebbe's answer was so clear, Im ein loy choyze hamachzik oisei shom, yochel is anyen la'atzoras acheres. Basically, the Rebbe is saying, these are my Rosh Shluchim. I picked them. If you don't like it, you can leave. And I was pleased with the answer because, first of all, the Rebbe...
I mean, it sounds like the Rebbe was telling you to go. The Rebbe is saying, as long as you don't have a contract that's holding you down, you should.
I want to tell you how it resonated by me.
Mm-hmm.
The Rebbe had seine Yidden, seine Shluchim that he picked. He's not changing them. If du kennst sich nicht ausgleichen mit sie, kannst du gehen Gesundheit. And I think maybe it's too sharp for young Leute to hear these days, but in my opinion, als der Rebbe weggeschnappt. And you know what? And then later on, I had the guy by my Shlichus over here. So I went straight from there to Chicago, but this answer was maybe an other. And I came to Chicago. I left Chaf Aleph Av from Michigan, and I came Chaf Aleph Av to Chicago. So there was no Beini Lebeini. In those days, there were Afers, there was Vostavils, you know. Mm-hmm. That was already Membez. So there was a lot of, I came Lamites over to Michigan. I came Yom L'Yom. I came Chaf Aleph Av, Lamites, and I left Chaf Aleph Av. I told Beryl, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mamalosh Naseim Shel Tzadikim Yom L'Yom. He didn't want to hear about it. But anyway, I learned a lot from Beryl. And so one of the offers, of course, was Chicago, and I came to Chicago. And of course, I knew Daniel back from Yeshiva in Montreal, about a year older than I am. And was geblieben was that I want to write into the Rebbe because of the money situation, without going into an arichas, I had tzveikis. So I wrote a letter. The
position was the position that you have now?
To start the school. There was a preschool, but to start the elementary school, that was why I was going to come, to start an elementary school.
In Detroit, what were you doing?
In Detroit, I was doing the same thing. Uh-huh. I was teaching 2 hours a day and taking care of Anholoshaft, whatever. Mm-hmm. Okay, we won't go into all that, but whatever. B'Peyal Mamish, I write to the Rebbe that I have sveikas. So I get a letter from the Rebbe. B'chtimis Yad Kodsha. B'kesher la'atzo'othoi b'Chicago, im sveikas etzloi al yikonis lover. That was in a letter, which was also a letter for the upshernish of my son. So it wasn't especially about that, but it was a nichbet b'tzidoi and the letter. So it wasn't like even an answer. The Rebbe could have given an answer.
It wasn't a minor.
It wasn't a minor, although I wrote a letter. The Rebbe could have written the minor on the letter, like the Rebbe did so many times.
Right.
So Al Kaponim, what happened was that the Al Yakonis says, I'm going to look into other things. Okay, Al Yakonis says, okay, so the Rebbe is telling me Al Yakonis, so right. I'm done. I don't know if it was several weeks or 2 months later, I get a call from Reb Daniel, Ahavas, and he tells me, Yitzchok, I want you to know that the shilas that you had are being resolved for a very interesting reason. There was another younger man that came from Montreal for the position, and the Rebbe's answer was, Im ein bozeh shilas shel asogas gevul. We don't know what means Asagas Gvul. What kind of Asagas Gvul? No one has the position. No one is giving away that. Like, the only thing we can think is of you. I said, you have your answer, and I have my answer. And I have an answer. You can't listen to that. No. So he says, you know what, you're writing in Mistama Datzos. In those days, Datzos were all over the place. And
they were to open new places or to
everything, whatever. It was like Naya-Stadt. I remember Buffalo wanted to open up something nearby, and even Wisconsin, I was there once, and there were offers. And but I was already involved in Chinuch, so when nooit to Chinuch, but so right back into the Rebbe that Reb Daniel came to me, and he has another atzar, and that 5 people are going to money for the first year, or whatever. There was a right away, within 2 hours, Askama Bracha Askalatzin. So although there was a letter like that, and so basically what the Rebbe said, im Sveikis Etzloi, it was Sveikis Etzloi. Sveikis Etzloi is all you can. So the Isarusa de Latatat gedarf bleiben, and then I guess came the answer, Askama Bracha Askalatzin. But then there was other inyanim that I had, but the time is rolling. Is the time for Psnachasipa for Rebbe?
I don't. There's no Hagbala on time. Rabbi Wolf, continue.
Yeah, while I was
take off your watch.
While I was in,
I have a question. What happened when you went on Shlichus to Detroit? I'm just curious. Like there was answers from the Rebbe to go by going to Detroit.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm. I think.
Then I also had Hatzaras and all this.
We discussed
my fetter, Ichimei Lipschitz, who was lived in Detroit at the time, convinced me you got to go. The Cheder needs somebody for NEO, for administration, whatever. So I went. I wrote to the Rebbe for State Al Kapanim, while I was in Detroit, Simchas Teire Mem Beis. So I had 2 kids at the time, and versteht sich, when I used to bring them for our coffees, was Shmini Atzeres. Simchas Teire, our coffees was very late. One of them was a year old, the other one was 2.5. So it was, you can only do so much. And one of them I held on my shoulders, and the other one, my shvogers took care of them. It wasn't easy bringing the kids. You must be stooped. Anyway, I brought them. I wanted them to see them. So I'm standing, mamish by the Mizrach Vayt to the left and top. There was pyramids over there to the top. So I was able to see the Rebbe perfectly. The Rebbe was able to see him. And it was noticeable. I was holding Moshe, my son, on my shoulders. It was noticeable that the Rebbe was looking several times, even made with the hand. And it was noticeable. But you know what? It could have been somebody near me, but it wasn't Shalom Spalter used to stand near me. But whatever. So Kapana, make a long story short, a day afterwards, after Simchas Teire, I drive back. I had myself, my wife, my 2 kids, and one of Stein's children, Ben Stein's, and Dachtach noch a kind. We're driving back, we're in the Poconos, and the car goes out of control and smashes onto the side, whatever. And the one that was not buckled in, punkt at the time, was my son Moshe, was a year old. And immediately, I don't know how, there were no cell phones, then the police from the Poconos came. We were all tied in except for him. He got out of his car seat and he banged his head. They immediately made an MRI, and he has not just like a fracture, but an indentation in the skull. And they suggested that surgery would be the right thing to lift the pressure from the skull, because if not, if you don't lift the pressure from the skull, he can have seizures, chas v'shalom, and all of that, as the child grows and all that. Okay, so I said I'm going to call the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's answer was, it took about 2-3 hours till I got the answer, and I kept on calling. The Rebbe's answer was, Lishel Eidapam, B'chedish Kislev Abba Aleinu L'Teva, Ask Al Atzion. Now, this is the day after Simchas, and they were ready for a surgeon to do the surgery. But and we're talking about one day after Simchas Torah, which is, I think, Chof Daled Tishrei. So it's about 5 weeks away from Kislev.
Right.
So it was an interesting thing.
So you were ready to do the surgery then?
Yeah, I mean, they
in the Poconos.
They suggested that. The pale, what happened was that when I come to, by the way, before I went back to Detroit, I went back to New York with my son. We left him there for a day because he was in trauma. So I came back to New York. I came to Minche with my son, and I stood by dimes. So it's interesting what happened, because the Rebbe gives him a dime. He looks at me, he gives him a dime, a nickel. And he throws it into the pushke, and the Rebbe hebt on gehen weiter, and he turns back around. Ich hab ihm gegeben, yeah? Just gave him. Ich hab ihm gegeben, yeah? Interesting. I don't know, it was a yachas or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Lepeo, Shlichus Kislev, the doctors were matzia in Henry Ford Hospital that the Rebbe should. They were matzia that make the surgery. So I'm going to ask the Rebbe right away. So the Rebbe's answer was, you should katzas oidreufer. Katzas oidreufer, you're going to ask another doctor. We went to another doctor. The other doctor said, you should definitely do it. You should do it. He's matzia to do it. So then there was a doctor that came from Pittsburgh. He was a surgeon, a pediatric surgeon, and we said, we're going to go to him because he knows the malacha. Make a long story, we made an appointment, and he's going to do the surgery a day before the surgery or 2 days before the surgery. We had another appointment with him, and he says, Rabbi, I don't think that you should do the surgery. So it's my high. Said, we just finished research on such injuries, and the same chance that he may have from seizures from the injury, he can have just from the surgery. So it doesn't pay. But now I'm really stuck because the pile, 2 doctors said yes. 1 doctor said no.
Right.
Darf man doch weiter fragen beim Rebbe. So I asked the Rebbe, and there is simply no answer. Weiter asked Binyamin again and again. So I asked Binyamin, what do I do? Binyamin said, if you don't have an askama from Rebbe, you don't do it.
Surgery.
You just don't do it. Several weeks later, I wrote to the Rebbe about another Indian, God about Detroit. And I wrote to the Rebbe, B'kesher l'bnisha yichye, v'yeshe le'kabalti tshuva m'kveg dushas admur, lo yosisi and netuach. So the Rebbe circled le'kabalti tshuva, kishe ein shayle ein tshuva askar alatzion.
Wow.
But then it's sich geendigt the meiste.
You're ready.
I wanted to be a oiberchacham.
Yeah.
So there is like no fault insurance in Michigan. So I thought that we could make, anyway, it was in court for about 5 years. My son was suing me because I bought 2 old tires, used tires for the trip. So my little son is suing me. It was in court several years. They even wanted to make a settlement. The insurance company, the OIMID, I had to have somebody that called that case. And I asked Elimelech Silverberg to, on behalf of my little son, to sue me, But to make a long story short, it took about several years, and I came back for the final thing, and the judge says that we're going to have to do over all the tests again, because the attorney was saying, these tests, it's such these injuries. It's not like a stock. It's not like you have like a small injury. It was an indentation in the skull, and that can still be putting pressure on the skull and whatnot on the brain. The Pearl Yaitse, what happened was we made more. The judge said, let's make over the tests and the pictures and the MRIs. We did it all. We come back several months later, and the doctor who's appointed, I guess, from the judge or whatever, says, and he had all the pictures lined up in front of the judge. Your Honor, there is no indication from these pictures that this child was ever in an accident or ever had an injury on the brain. Madam Yitzchok geendigt, and we didn't get my son didn't get a dime, and I was very happy. That's what they geendigt in Baruch Hashem. But the Rebbe's tshuva kishein shaila ain't tshuva askalotzin. I want to, because it's starting to get, I want to say something about chinuch, which I think two things I'm going to say.
You read my mind, because I was about to tell you that I'm sitting across, I'm mechanech, I don't know, among Chassidim podcasts, I'm sure we'll have many types of people, but I don't know I don't know who the next person in Chinuch is on.
I want to talk about Chinuch. When you wrote Duch zum Rebbe, the Rebbe read the Duch. So I remember, I didn't know if his name was mentioned, but it could be. There was a child in Cheder, 11, 12-year-old. For some reason, he was sent to Chicago from Detroit. There was a Makurev over there, and for some reason they sent him here to learn. This goes back about even 35 years ago. Maybe less, 32 years ago. And I got a call from Label, the Rebbe will wissen, and he was having difficulties. The Rebbe will wissen, was mit tun für jenem Kind.
This is like Tashan Nun Beis?
No. This was earlier. This was Mem Test, maybe.
The Tashan Mem Test, Rebbe wants to know what are you doing with the kid. Okay.
Yeah, the Rebbe wants to know, Mem Test, the Rebbe wants to know what we're doing for that kid. The kid obviously has Schwierigkeiten.
Wow.
I think. Then, two things really. I mean, this was already in one of my stories, but it's worthwhile to repeat this. Before I get to that, I want to say another story. That at the beginning of our school in Chicago, they wanted people in the shtot. Most of the kids we had were from non-Chabad homes. But they liked the private attention, the small classrooms, and all that. People who were not necessarily from the Chabad community had no problem sending their kids. But then we saw that when it comes to first grade, they take out the children. And then there was a case, somebody wanted to come back afterwards. So we made a rule. Once you leave, you can't come back. Because it's Shlichus, because you can have a class of, then it was a class of 8, 10 kids. If 2 of them leave, it's Shlichus. So there was a Telsa Yid living in Chicago, and I don't think he would mind me telling the story, because there's a Choshev Yid, there's a Zokan Yid, he's already over 90. And his Ben Zekunim's name was Avrumi. He sent him to kindergarten and like pre-1A. And then he wanted him to go to the Litvischer Meisid in town, which is a very good Meisid by the name of Tiferet 3. He's now as Zachnish Kalabavitcher, so as long as he was in preschool, nice kid, nice program, also fine. Even there was Yiddish in the school by then, full-time Yiddish in the school, so everyone liked it. Okay. He calls me up. So, okay, I said, once you leave, you leave. Okay. He calls me up. This was in Kessel also. I don't know if the year was Mem Hey, Mem Vav, whatever year it was. It was around there. Mem Hey, Mem Vav. He calls me up. He says, Rabbi Wolf, my kid doesn't want to go to any school other than Cheder Lubavitch. You got to take him back. So I said to him, Rabbi Richter, Rabbi, we have a policy now. I know your son, Mistam, really wants to be here. But frankly speaking, if you won't take him out now, if you'll send him back now in a year or two, you'll take him out again. I know what's going to happen. You're a Telza Yid, and I have big chashivas, nice community. The Telza community in town, very nice. They have their school and everything. So I don't want to do this. A kid back and forth and back and forth. You don't go school hopping with children. He says, okay, if given sheyotza gzeira, you're not going to take him. Okay, I'll live with it. He calls me back several weeks after Sukkot. Rabbi Wolf, this kid has a Lubavitch in the Shoma. You must take him back. I said, we have a policy. He says, policy, schmalacy. You're going to take him back. He sits every day in front of the classroom. He's 6 years old. Will nicht da reingehen in Gitte. He doesn't want to see the classroom. Only wants to come back to Cheder Lubavitch. I took him back. Great kid. And today he's a Shliach by the name of Avrumi Richter. Und sein Tat ist Neskarev geworden zu Lubavitch. He's the youngest of his children. Beautiful mishpacha. Rumi's a shliach today somewhere in New York, New York State. Recently, I spoke to him. And his father now, an elder Yid, a Yid Alamden, a Bentere. And he lives on 580 Crown Street. He moved into. So it's in the Lubavitcher Shchuna. So it's very nice. His mother, very, very, very nice people, extraordinarily nice people. And Avrumi Richter is one of our success stories. Yeah. There was Yud Shvat, Hey Tevis time. And you know what happened at the time? That the Rebbe said, I think it was a Sorah B'Tevis, that there should be 3 pchines, Mizol Marayshik and the pchines.
After the 7 days of
after
celebration.
The 7 days of celebration. What I used to do
so that applied to schools all over Lubavitch. So the
everywhere, yeshivas everywhere.
There's tests.
So what I started to do at the beginning of the MEMS, I have a chaver, Mendy Gluchovsky, so sein gesund. We were in yeshiva in 770 together in Kela. And he, not in Kela, because he went to Tzisol. In yeshiva, we were in Zal together. And Lepeo, he tells me, well, given a gleiche Zach, everything that the teachers give out, you should send it to the Rebbe. Everything, a worksheet, anything they give out, they should know. First of all, they would be more careful and try to develop sheets that should be acceptable. They would do that anyway, but make them more aware this is going into the Rebbe.
As the Rebbe says, if they know that if they know that a bus of a dumb is looking at it.
Yeah. So anyway, so I used to have a tray on my desk, and they used to throw in the copies of the sheets of paper on my desk, and it used to go to the Rebbe. I always got answers. This Kabel B'tach, Besmiches Lazeh, all these answers. It was always, Kamatvi always answers. I did it once a month, if Shamal given once every 2 months also. But this time, hey, Tevis, I had a gewalt of stuff from pchines, from papers. So mamish, a box like this. I'm not exaggerating. I brought to New York, and I send it in. I leave it in the office to Rabbi Groner. So, it's fine, Rebbe. The Rebbe asked for the pchines. 2 days after Yud Shvat, I'm back. I get a call from Chadakov. I can go on a lot about Rabbi Chadakov. I had a nice kasha with him.
I was going to say that Mistame, because you were in Chinuch, Rabbi Chadakov had an extra special connection because
he wants
Chinuch, right?
Yeah, the one who got me into that was Beryl Shem Tov, and I thank him for that.
He told you to call Chadakov all the time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I once wrote a letter to Chadakov on my letterhead with a Hatzor. The Gashmis the Hatzor that I got to give in to the Federation, audited statements. I matzia, I tell him that today is not via mol, as alle shluchim sollen das tun. He sent it into the Rebbe. I have a copy of it. The Rebbe wrote in it Mohir, Lasses Kane, and the initials to give it over to Yudel Krinsky.
To give what over?
The letter, the contents of the letter. Amazobet Nala Shluchim, Araingeben audited statements. And what he told me later on is that as a result of that, he makes that achroza I have a copy of the letter on my phone.
That's the reason why he makes that announcement by the Chinuch.
The letter that I wrote was Tov Shin Mem Vav. I don't know if it's important to read it, but the Rebbe's answer was Lasses Kain, like B'mechilas Kvei Torosei. I think that would be the proper thing to do. I write the Chadakov, and the Rebbe's answer was very interesting. So Al Kaponim. So going back to Chadakov calls me 2 days after Yitzchok. And he says, du hast durchgeguckt, die alle Sachen, was du hast da reingeschrieben zum Rebbe? So I said, BMS, nein. And zu viel, aber ich verlasse sich auf den Morim, auf die Schluche mit dem Marot, verlasse. So he says that dort ist da Machberes von einem Kind, und der innerwenigste Tovo von der Machberes hat dort ein Schir, was gehört nicht zum Cheder. And he asked me if I know about that Shir, which was inappropriate. It was a Ketav book, Machberes from Ketav that used to publish like Hebrew, with Hebrew lines that you should be able to write Alamed carefully, and Alangachof carefully, and in the back it was more of a Zionist book. He went out now a shir. So
a shir like a song.
A song, yeah. Milim mit Welt
a shir.
He asked me if I know about it, and I said I know what it is. So he said, on a parad, sollst du durchgehen alle Kittis und sehen, ob sie nicht da noch solche Shirim, Machberesen, und sie verbeiten mit Naye, aber on a parad. Can you imagine? It's 2 days after Yud Shvat, and I sent it to the Rebbe. Now, what the Rebbe did with it, I don't know. But there was already a response 2 days after that. Shingeven a response. Grade.
Do you want to share what the shir was?
It was a Zionist shir. I'll leave it up to your imagination. But Al Kapanim, one of the Zionist songs, but it didn't belong in a cheder. Al Kapanim, it's not the first time that you get the feeling that mamish, my hat on everything I used to send in, the Rebbe. But sometimes some things are happening and you don't even know it's going to end up by the Rebbe. So I'll give you something. Yitzchok David Grossman came to Cheder for some odd reason in our old building. He came with Daniel brought him, Ahavas Shalom, and he brought him to Cheder. Then he said, "Let me make pictures." And so somebody was there with a camera from his people that he came with. He took a picture with me and Daniel standing next to him and snapping pictures. Several weeks later, I met him in New York. He said, was macht ich? Ich said, will dir sagen, ich bin gewesen bei der Lehrerin, ich habe gewissene Bilder zum Rebbe. Und der Rebbe hat mir gesagt, ich kenne doch die junge Leute, sie doch meine junge Leute. When I heard that, you didn't know, you're taking pictures, and then suddenly it's going to be by the Rebbe. That's what he told us. But it came from himself. I didn't ask him about the pictures because it wasn't an issue. He himself initiated the conversation. So Al Kapanim, there was a lot of things mitzat chinuch that it was obvious that I asked once Chadakov, because I used to have conversations with him, is the Rebbe zufrieden von unser Cheder? So a typical answer. Der Rebbe sei zufrieden, aber was mit der anderen 10.000 Kinder, jüdische Kinder in Illinois? Der tust etwas mit sie. This was the typical Chadakov. I don't know if it came from I asked him on a telephone conversation. By the way, Chadakov was always involved in things. So I once asked him for a certain hadrocha in several inyonim. We were going to move the girls' school here, v'chulu. And on the phone, he's giving his hadrocha. So at the end, several things. At the end of the conversation, I asked him, ich will alles verschreiben. And this was in the end of MEMS. The fax machines were going ready. Und ich will es verschreiben und faxen zu euch. Und ob sie da Ha'aretz, was sie will mir sagen, soll es sein auf... So he said, yeah. And he sent me back with Ha'aretz. And I remember by Chinuch-Hiskashrus, I read it. So you never knew at Chadakov what comes from the Rebbe, what doesn't come from the Rebbe. But that was a Dova Bor, that Chadakov was so involved with Chinuch that this was sometime in the MEMS, that after Reb Moshe passed away, Reb Moshe Katarsky, somehow his children had a copy of that letter. I'm not sure how it came, but could be through Chadakov it came to him. So I wrote a letter to Chadakov that I need Melamdim, I need Shluchim over here, because he's in charge of Chinuch. Maybe he commits, if he knows people that want to go into Chinuch, he should see them to contact me. Can you imagine writing such a letter to Chadakov? Like asking him, please help me in my Shlichus. I need some employees. And upon him, I'm just telling you that the involvement with Chadakov there was another thing that I had from Chadakov that gave...
people think that Chinuch is not Shlichus.
Chinuch is 100% Shlichus. I take great offense when you make such a statement.
That's why I asked it, because I wanted to... It wasn't a statement. It's a question.
A rhetorical
I wanted to refute it. I don't want to do anything. I'm just bringing it up because people say this.
Okay, wenn es gewähren, the meiste mit the Tmunis, with the Sefer Shlichus, so the ones that were in Chinuch, die gewähren es a ganze meiste.
They didn't want to put it in.
Right. And Lepeil Mamish, it went into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was masking that the Chinuch. So even the Chinuch in New York were over there. And then, by us, Chinuch is part of our Shlichus over here. It's so obvious, I wrote into the Rebbe, as soon as I came here, I took the blank that I copied from Detroit, Hedel Lubavitch. The side things was my own, but the Hedel and Tach Nesias Kvekdushas. And in those days, every blank you sent into the Rebbe, you started a Shlichus, you have a stationery, the blank they called it. You send it into the Rebbe. And of course, I sent it into the Rebbe, and it was normal. I didn't get a no, I didn't get a yes, but it was.
So the Cheder Chabad in
yeah.
Chicago is Tachas Nesis.
Cheder Lubavitch, Tachas Nesis, yeah. So Al Kapanim. So to say that those were not shluchim was. But I'll tell you another thing, which I think is important, and it was Mem Zion, the famous Mem Zion, Hey Tevis, with the Rebbe gave Geld. This time you know about that famous Hey Tevis. The Rebbe said that 10%, I think the Rebbe said he'll give him 50% of the budget or the
Memches, no?
Yeah, Memches, yeah. He's going to give it a halvor.
It was halvor, yeah. To shluchim.
Yeah. So we didn't know what's going on, because I asked Rebbe Daniel, what's going on?
What do you mean?
We're not getting.
Oh, you didn't receive it? Okay.
Yeah. So, this is what I heard. It went to Chadakov. Chadakov said, der Shliach dorten is doch Reb Shlomo Zalman Hecht. Shlomo Zalman Hecht was gone already 8 years or something. And the Shliach was Reb Daniel Moskowitz, and everything did go through him. So I'm not sure what Chadakov meant, and I'm not going to judge. But hearing that, I got like, what's going on? I'm a shliach because of Reb Daniel Moskowitz, who brought me down. Shliach is a shliach. What do you mean? Then I'm nothing.
Right.
So I contacted Chadakov, and I said, that's how I know that I'm a shliach, through Reb Daniel Moskowitz. If he's not a shliach, I'm not a shliach, I'm resigning tomorrow morning. Lepel, there was others. Another one from the Shluchim here that I heard wrote a letter, whatever. And Lepel, it was Nestadim. The Neil was the Reis HaShluchim. What he meant, who knows? By him could be if he didn't get. I didn't even want to know what he meant or say what he meant. I don't know. Yeah. But there were things that was self-understood that when Chadakov speaks at times, he speaks from the Rebbe. And I'll give you a mashal what happened. His oldest son, which is now here, was filled to Illinois.
Whose son?
Meir Shimon. Meir Shimon is the oldest son of Rabbi Daniel.
Yeah, okay.
So at the time of his bar mitzvah, his father wrote a letter to the Rebbe that the Meiset has some Limud Chayil, and he would rather see his bar mitzvah, not have him engaged in Limud Chayil, and he's going to send him to his aide in Toronto. His aide was from the Chassidim Yidden, Mendel Aronov. Yeah, it was Chassidim Yid with Mendel. I remember he used to come to Montreal. I think he had a Schwieger over there or a mother. I'm not sure who he had.
Yeah.
He had somebody in Montreal. He used to come and visit. Maybe he came to visit the Zeitlins because Herschel Zeitlin was a Schwager. Yeah.
I learned in Sifta in Toronto, so I know.
Oh, so
I know him. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I used to sit by his Fabringens. Yeah.
Yeah. So Al Kapanim. So I write a settled some Rebbe. That Bechal, there was ongoing conversations, Yela Mudachel, Nishla Mudachel, whatever. I write a settled some Rebbe that
he was also big, strong, he was a big advocate of Nolda Mudachel, Mendel Aronov. Yeah.
So I read it settled some Rebbe that he's the son of the Reish HaShluchim, and it's 8th grade. So I'm ready to close the 8th grade Limud Chayil and just have Limud Kodesh all day, because I get a call from Chadakov, and he was livid. Du weißt nicht, dass Hero sei ish proti ist nicht kein Hero von dem Zibur. Du weißt nicht wegen dem. Du weißt nicht, dass the Yisroel, I said, as the Reish HaShluchim. So we're part of the Shluchim. So he was adamant on Hero zu ish proti is nicht kein Hero von Zibur, nicht kein Hero von Klau. So that was very important to hear this, that sometimes we hear, I mean, the fact, the Nun Aleph, the Nun Beis, there was sometimes tshuvis to Anoshim Pratim, but it doesn't mean that became, I don't want to go into that pasha, but it doesn't mean that it became a hero for a ganzen Tzibur, for a ganzen Klau. Okay, I'll come on him. That's it.
So I have a question. Did you ever speak to Rabbi Chadakov anything about tuition?
No. But the people that I hired all went through Chadakov. L'reish v'rishona, we had a Choshev, younger man over here that I brought into the Mossad, which now is the manal of a very big Mossad, Lubavitch Masifta of Chicago. Reb Moshe Binyamin Perosian, the younger man, a Goy, and a Lamdan, a Chassid. But when I brought him in, I asked the Rebbe and Chadakov, told me what I should do, whatever, with the Shlichus, whatever. It was some Shlichus. But Al Kapanim, it went to the Rebbe, Askama Bracha, everything. So Chadakov was involved, and the Rebbe was involved in our Shlichus. So to say that the Shluch Chinuch, I think today it's so obvious that our biggest challenge is Chinuch. And Baruch Hashem, I can say that we gave out a lot of nice Talmidim from Chicago, and now with the Mesifta, it's becoming the normal thing. They go from to the Mesifta, and then we have the girls' high school, which is also an outgrowth. It used to be Lubavitch Girls, Cheder Lubavitch Girls High School. Then at the end, the Neil felt that it should be independent for fundraising, for a lot of other things, and it went. And today, Rabbi Hertz is state bereish from this big Mossad, so it's beautiful. And we have, just in the elementary and preschool, we have just under 500 Talmidim and Talmidis, and the school is growing. We're in the middle of a big project, and I can just say one thing, that it was 1991, it was Limisporim, on Memorial Day. We had a big schreif in our house, and it was right after that Shabbos. I forgot what day in Sivan it was, that the Rebbe came in and washed after Mincha on his place. What day in Sivan?
Shabbos Pashas Nasi.
Shabbos Nasi, right. So right after that, Monday morning, was the fire. The children were in the hospital. The Peils and the Rebbe told me 3 times, 2 times to me and 1 to my wife. After that, Yedu versteht B'Shem Svarim Chasreife wird Merach. Kaponim, so Baruch Hashem, the meisters are growing, Baruch Hashem, on the Rebbe's Keiches we see over here, and it's 50 years since my Shlichus. And I can say, Shlichus is today what saves younger light. And we're not doing it because it saves younger light. Because Hiskashrus of Rebbe today is Shlichus.
So let me ask you a question.
The Rebbe said there are 4 levels of Hiskashrus. So Tavshin Yud Yud Aleph, Asiyas Pelesov, Limud Teirosei, Tzir Panov, Ishtatris Halatzian. There's no other way. There's no detour that you can take. Foreign of Shlichus im Rebbe, Azeis wird bekushet zum Rebbe. Sicher, Ano Nafshi Kisovis Yehovis, der Rebbe hat sich reingelegt in das Forum, die Ksovim Lazachayk, v'chulu, that lernen the Rebbe's Mamorim, the Rebbe's Siches, the Rebbe's Igris, the Rebbe's Rishimis, which is so beautiful. And Shlichus is what the Rebbe wanted. Einem in the Welt.
So what do you, what's your message? I mean, before you were describing very beautifully, first of all, the whole upbringing and the atmosphere and everything that you grew up with, but also the Gan Eden and the Tainug Ruchni that you experienced by the Rebbe, and obviously even on Shlichus, you know, all these Herois, and the answers you got. What's your message to someone like my age and younger that doesn't have that experience? How could, and we know it's a fact that the Yatim Chayei and Malahal and Eimon the Meshamish and everything is continuing until we're Mamali the Shlichus and make a dira b'tachteinim. But how do you have that? I mean, for you, it's like you experienced it, so it could come even without Aveda. Today, it feels like there's more Aveda needed. So, what's your message to
so
that
first
generation?
First of all, when I walk into the Mesifta, I come some ale, and I see Shabbos morning, 100 Bochurim sitzen and learn Chassidus. It's Pashat Hanor to see how the Rebbe is working today. Bochurim learn Chassidus, gain of Mivtzoim. The Kochen Rebbe's in Yonim is unbelievable. By the way, it's unparalleled in Jewish history, because we know what people said about the day after Gimmel TammuzAnd. And everyone is made that it's Pashat Fakelt. I was once sitting at a table by a dinner, a banquet over here. So sitz der Rosh Yeshiva, Yener Rosh Yeshiva. I was on that table. So a guy says to me, Rabbi Wolf, you guys are Chabad with your networking. You guys are just so unbelievable what you accomplished. If you would only omit one thing, can you imagine what you could accomplish? What's that thing? This whole Rebbe thing. I said, then we would look like you. I said, I want to look like you. So of course we need a Rebbe thing. The Hiskashrus im Rebbe is a thing that it's beyond Havonah v'Hasaga. Can you understand that when you mekayim a mitzvah, is memamshech the Meir Sof? Das verstehst du ja. Also steht in Chassidus, and it says, Goli v'yodua, that man lernt, als Chassidus, a yitut a mitzvah, tzavs v'chiva, verbindt sich mit Nebischten. And how it happens, we don't know. The Rebbe gave the hero for the Deir HaShvi. And he gave 4 things. And he gave it Yud Aleph when the Rebbe basically wrote the Shulchan Aruch of Hiskashrus. So you're asking. So I look at what's going on, and I scratch my head, and I don't understand it. Just like I don't understand how a mitzvah is mamshech to make himself, I also don't truly understand the keach hakdusha for Nasi Adair that 30 years later, können Bochum sitzen, lernen am Maimon von Rebbe, chazern Chassidus Barabim, mit Eisius Harav, and that inspires them. And they go with Tzarm. Think about it today. We're living in the United States, 2025. A teenager, Friday afternoon, frag ich bei dir, hat nicht besser was zu tun, mit gehen kriechen from one floor to the other. One floor of offices, they let them in. The other one, they kick them out, come back on Monday morning. And me chapt ein Yid, me tut mit dann Twilen, befragt if he's a kakafte, and the bocher comes back, and he's glowing. Why is he glowing? He could have done so many other things Friday afternoon. I know what teenagers are. I mean, I'm somewhat involved in Chinuch. So I know. And you watch this, or you watch kids want to do miftzorim with their parents. How is this happening? I mean, if you really think about it, how is this happening? The Rambam was a great man. He didn't accomplish that. Even if you think back about the Rebbeim, when you speak about the Rebbeim, mit darf sich hitten mit der Wort. And Bechal, you're talking about the Baal Shem Tov, mit der Magid, mit alle Rebbeim, mit all of this. But you see, the Deir HaShvi, it's not a normal thing. I mean, we all can agree it's not a normal thing. So you're asking me, I don't have the answer. I just know it's not normal. So l'maylam derech hateva, mit Aftom mit Kabbalah Sol, a Yid is a Kabbalah Solnik, a Kabbalah Solnik is a Yid, sitzen Bochum, sie darf Tonnen Mifzar, and that's the beginning and that's the end. For a younger man to take his wife, and we're living in a big world, and the world is small, but you take somebody and you send them to Vietnam or South Korea. Die Schwierigkeiten. I have my own son in Montana. I have other children that are in Shlichus too. Miami is not Montana. Montana is not Miami. New Hyde Park is not Montana. You know what I mean? Sitzt man in Montana. And I know certain things that my son would be upset if I repeated. The Geidel am Mesilas Nefesh. And wann nimmt sich das? Und in Pasha you know what I mean? In Indian, think about this. I was a kid. The only sefer in Yiddish you had was Tax and Tales. And then you had a Chutz Tax and Tales. There was the sefer, a blue book, the Baal Shem Tov. I don't know if you ever came across today. It's included in so many other svarim. Dort faran one chapter of the Grace Shlichus. What did the Baal Shem Tov do? Baal Shem Tov hat reingerufen a paar Talmidim. Hat sie gegessen fasten. Whatever he told them to do. Me geht mesaken seine Shomes. It's a whole story, the Grace Shlichus. There's another story over there. A Yid that was a Ben Shivim. It was a Grace Alam. You do a story when I read Baal Shem Tov geschickt von den Talmidim, von der Eineklach, whatever. Hat sie gegeben Kirches. Who was the Shadar bei dem Tzemach Tzedek? A halber Rebbe. Well, Hill Parasha. Hill Parasha was a halber Rebbe. Harava Tzaddik, Rabbi Hill Parasha. That's all you need. I didn't know people the Friedrich Rebbe named Harava Tzaddik. Zalman Moshe, the Rebbe wrote. That's how. Yeah. Okay. Then you go. You're talking about Yidden Rebbe the Masmid. The Gevel Shadar. Okay, I get it. A Shadar Rebbe the Masmid. About Ruach Hakodesh. I get it. They tell a story that I heard this from Rabbi Schusterman. He was in Chicago, and it was in Tzaddik Ches, and he stayed in one place for 2 weeks, and he had his whatever he had was not gegessen. He didn't eat by these people, and Lepel 2 weeks later I get a handful. So they see that the bed wasn't even touched, and they needed a bracha for children. They went to Chassidim, so they came to him. They said, "We will von euch a bracha." So he said, "The Rebbe is not fort. He wird schreiben, not fort. Some Rebbe mit gegeben." They basically told him, "You're enough of a good Rebbe for us. You give us a bracha." And they took away, he got a klein Rensel. He had a baggage, a small suitcase. They said, we're not giving it back until you give us the suitcase. So he gave them a bracha mit den Rebens Keach, that the gebencht wären mit a Kind, and they had a child. He came back, when he came back, I heard this from Schusterman, Rebbe Schusterman, he said that he told the Frierdiker Rebbe what he did, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said, this time he'll let it go through, aber mehr soll er Brachas nicht geben mit dem Keach vom Frierdiker Rebbe. No, he didn't want to touch that. So Al Kapanim, Rebbe Shliach met Rebbe Shem Tov, which was, by the way, talking about Rebbe Shem Tov, when we came to Australia, so the one that used to come with us everywhere was Zusha the Partisan. He was our guide, and he was
in Eretz Yisroel.
In Eretz Yisroel.
On the way to Australia.
On the way to Australia, yeah. So what happened was, this time, the one who met us was Ben Shem Tov, Tov Shin Lamed Hey, Chav Daled here. We came on Chav Daled. We left Chav Gimel Chav Daled. Everywhere where we went, he is following us. Motzei Shabbos, we were Shabbos in Kfar Chabad. Mat gehulet a ganzen Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos, we went to 7. We came back 1 o'clock at night from Yerushalayim. 4 o'clock, we got to go to Tehran. We come to the airport. The man is standing there. And we're leaving. He said, he's like the letzte Shluchim from Mashiach. He made a Boche Shechiyonu B'Shem Malchus. Several weeks later, he had the accident and he passed away. So, when a Shadar, jeder Ingelheint is a Shadar. You think about it. Shluchim, Jungele. And what are they doing? We're not talking about the Baal Shem Tov, but Mesaken gewinne, die junge Leute, Mesaken the Shamas. They lab auf neshamas, and these are the Rebbe, the keiches from Rebbe. It's unimaginable. It's unparalleled. What you want to say to Tmimim? Just think what we're doing. In 770, Father Rosh Hashanah, Father Tkiyas, wegstellen met je Pinchas Katz, met de Arab game van de Tischen voor de Benkler, Kedushes Hamokim, Kedushes Hazman, we zal wissen wo me steht en van wem me steht. Younger light that are going know this. They have to articulate it. Kedushes Hamokim, Kedushes Hazman, we zal wissen wo me steht en van wem me steht. That's my message. What a message. Look what's going on. We can't have help. With Mesakim Neshamas. It's unbelievable, no? Have a nice day, Rabbi.
Yashekayach God Rabbi Wolf. Hatzlach Rabbi in the Shlichus.
All the best. God bless.